What's going on, everybody? Hi, welcome to the podcast. It's the Jeff Gerstmann Show. It's October 11th. I'm Jeff Gerstmann. I'm here with you to talk about video games, but I'm not alone. I am joined by the one, the only Dave Snider. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. I forgot how much energy that you bring. I had forgotten the intro, Jeff.
Yeah,
voice.
no, there's the pre-show, all right, let me line up this shot. Okay, let's try to get your full head in the shot. We failed at that. And then, oh shit. Okay. All right. Yeah. Now that's, I mean, you have to turn it on.
Bring it.
You got to, you got to turn it. And that's, without the benefit of any energy drinks so far today. I've been taste testing energy drinks. I don't know if you know this about me, but I've been known to taste test.
There's still some left.
Dude. The market is I literally had a news story on the show last week about lawsuit drama in the energy drink business. It sounds like Bang Energy has run into some trouble. They were claiming that their drinks had super creatine in them, which is not a real thing, and so they got sued, and now there's all this other stuff. Someone, I went out and found this yesterday. Someone mentioned this to me on Twitter. There's a Crash Bandicoot themed energy drink on the market from the G Fuel people it appears to be called Wumpa Fruit. So I went out and bought one, and I'm gonna see. Just gonna very quickly just see how this tastes. We're gonna smell it. We're gonna taste it. Just get this out of the way at the top of the show. It smells like an indistinct fruit.
Do you pour these? Is it orange? I would hope it's orange.
I don't pour them now that you mention it. I don't usually know. It appears to be a clearish. It's not orange, I'll tell you that much.
Because with energy drinks, I would one of my testing methods would be do things settle at the bottom?
Sure. Yeah, that would be a bad. This is. This one's not. This one's maybe not outstanding. It's got a back end chemical flavor to it that is maybe a bit much, and the fruit at the front of the taste is a little too light to mask that.
That's just the pop. That's the energy that Crash brings, man.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, when you collect 100 Wumpa fruits, I guess that's how you feel after the fact. So what have you been up to? You've been bouncing around. So we work together. I mean, I guess for people who don't know, we worked together kind of a little indirectly. Man. Yeah. When you were at mp3.com and tv.com, when I was at GameSpot.
I put a post up. I was talking to Hacker News or something.
Yeah.
And somebody you're the guy that ruined mp3.com. I was a community manager at a place where people were doing drugs at the office.
Yeah. I'm not the one.
Did not ruin mp3.com.
Yeah.
As if it was a great bastion of the internet to begin with.
Dude. So that's the thing is I loved mp3.com. And then when we acquired it, by the time that the company, I guess it would have been CNET Networks or whatever back then. Mm-hmm. When we acquired it, that site had already fallen so far downhill that it was just man, yeah, it's really sucks that we're even getting into this business because this site has got nothing going for it anymore. Because it used to be all these independent artists uploading MP3s and struggling for leadership of some regional. I was the number one rap group in Petaluma, because they broke it.
What was the competition?
There was three others. There were I don't know. There were three others. There was the band I used to be in, and then there was a couple others. And so I was yeah, fuck this. I run this town. And then one day they were we've got a brand new MP3 from Ice-T. And then not too long after that, it was have you heard of this Eminem guy? We got an MP3. And so they started chasing after major label artists. And so all the focus went away from all the indie stuff. I mean, this is, describing the internet, I guess, at large in a lot of ways. But so by the time it came into the family or whatever, it had already become some weird, crappy version of itself. And
I came into it as an outsider. I remember like I interviewed with I was running this like DVD collection website.
Guzzlefish. Everyone remembers Guzzlefish.
Guzzlefish, sure.
I used Guzzlefish.
Yeah. And I remember I interviewed with Greg Kasavin and talked with him for a good hour about Arcanum, Steamworks, and Magic Obscura, you know?
Yeah.
And I was basically telling him, I was like, you know, I was fanboying it. I was like, you gave that game like a 7, and like everybody loves that game, but that is, you know, we were basically like breaking it down. And it's for like an hour-long thing. And so like the craziest thing was I came in knowing all the personalities at GameSpot, but they were like, you're going to go work on MP3. And I was like, oh, that site with, you know, everything that was going crazy. And they're like, we bought it, but we're not doing anything with it. We're rebuilding. And I was like, oh, I'm 24 years old. You're going to give me a job?
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Right.
let's go do it.
Yeah.
So that's how, and then you and I mostly just kind of, we'd see each other in hallways.
Yeah.
And I think it was pretty much always like little nods that would be like, I know that you're real.
Yeah,
you know?
I know that dude is over there doing some kind of real work. He seems like he cares about what he's doing.
Late.
Yeah, right.
You know,
he seems like someone who cares about what he's doing, which is more than I could say for half the other people on that floor. So there was definitely, it was a pretty quick process of figuring out like who knows what they're doing and gives a shit about making something good and who doesn't. And and then, gosh, I guess like then I found myself out of my ass. So you left.
I left before you did, and I was doing Comic Vine,
right,
and all that stuff. And then that's when you got kicked out of GameSpot.
Yeah,
and then that's when we were like, hey.
Right.
Remember when we used to nod in corridors?
Yeah. What if we nodded a lot closer? Yeah. And that was the craziest thing. Cause like I was, at the time, like the stuff had kind of, as that story kind of blew up and all that stuff happened, like people started getting in touch being like, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? And, there are a few things that sounded like I could go do this, but I don't want to go run a news site. Like that's not necessarily my forte, but like if that's what's out there, that's what's out there. And then I came in and met with you guys in Sausalito, like right after I did an IGN podcast. Like they just invited me on to come talk about whatever. Because Alex had smuggled me out an Xbox 360 debug, like he stole one out of the GameSpot offices and a copy of Burnout Paradise. Like I was up on an unreleased game, so I was able to go on IGN and be like, so Burnout Paradise is this, and all this other stuff, which was funny. And then on my way back, like you were like, hey, you want to come through? Like, what kind of sandwich do you want? We're getting sandwiches. And I was like,
I remember I had a blazer that was back. I'd wear like tweed blazers. They made me feel cool. I don't know why I was like in an in-between stage.
That's like an indie rock kind of, I feel like that.
Sure.
This is 07. So that's kind of, I feel like if you're going to do an indie rock 2007,
just some sensitive tunes on
exactly. Yeah. That's
maybe something with like a sea shanty background, it'll work.
Yeah.
And our go-between was Ryan, which is both like the best and the worst go-between, probably, in between. Yes. So it was one of the most enthusiastic and unreliable people I've ever known. It's like, what time are we meeting?
Right.
All right.
Yeah. Oh man.
And then there was just a few years of goofball.
Let's make him the host because then he'll have to show up. And it all kind of went from there, and then I don't know. And then at some point, the company got sold, and another round of bullshit, I guess, came along after that. Some good stuff, some bad stuff, whatever. It's
it's the internet, man. That's just kind of the cycle of things.
Yeah, I guess it is. And so what have you, after we came into CBS, you were there probably like less than a year, right?
So I went and helped rebuild. We had to rebuild that site kind of from scratch. So we did that for Comic Vine and Giant Bomb. And then it was essentially like, I was a designer. I would show up on your guys' show or something occasionally, but day to day, I was building stuff in the background.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, the next things were like, hey, go, rebuild GameSpot and do all that stuff. And I was kind of too big of a tech nerd, to be honest. So I bolted out of there. And then weirdly enough, I bounced a couple places. I worked with Kuntz again for a short minute. And then we had an engineer that was on that whiskey team, this guy Hansa Kral, who is Czech. And he ended up being one of the first employees at this place called Elastic, which makes Elasticsearch. And so I was like, I just had kids.
Yeah.
I'm done with like publishing business craziness. Like, let's go into like a steady job. And that place ended up blowing up. And so I just kind of like ran design there for a few years, and it was fun, but it was definitely like, it took all my tech stuff there. Basically what would happen is I then lived the next 8 years where people would find stuff of me on the internet.
Oh yeah.
From like the whiskey days, or something, or they'd find like the hardcore Dave meme or something like that and like bring it up. And I'd be like, yes, everything on the internet lives forever.
Right.
And that's cool. That's okay. Yeah. Here's me where I had black hair. Here's me where I wore cool tweed blazers.
That's right. Here's Indie Rock Dave doing Indie Rock Dave stuff. Yeah. We used Elastic at some point at Giant Bomb. They tried to switch search over to it, and I remember it being a massive improvement that then there was no, I'm trying to remember, like there was no upkeep on it, and so it eventually kind of became bad search all over again, and then they tried to replace it with something else, and I was like, at this point, I was like, oh man, I just want to lay down.
Search is tough, man. It's like UX. It's like you got to sit there and like you just tweak dials essentially. Yeah, you're like, which Mario shows up? Well, there's like 40 of them, right? And like 100 games. So.
And most people are searching for a video you did involving Mario, and not like we had unique search problems with the wiki and the content together on one thing. Which I kept
websites.
Yeah, websites. I don't know, websites. Speaking of websites, we're going to take a quick break for an ad, and then we're going to come back and, I don't know, probably talk more about websites and also Overwatch 2 and graphics cards and whatever, and how every third game now is what I would call a Dave game. Now, every early access game is now suddenly some janky Eastern European thing. The world is truly your oyster. We'll be right back. Dress shirts, they're the worst, right? I mean, God, what an uncomfortable piece of clothing. But hey, this is the world in which we live. Sometimes you're going to find yourself in a situation where you have to wear a dress shirt, and you're like, man, all right, well, count down the minutes until I can rip this thing off, throw it in the car, and then just never think about it again. Rhone is here to change the way you feel about dress shirts. Because, I mean, let's face it, they were due for a radical reinvention. Rhone has stepped up to the challenge with the commuter shirt, the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible shirt known to man. And here's why. Rhone has a comfortable four-way stretch fabric that provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work to, I don't know, 18 holes of golf. What are you doing? You going to a bar after? Hey, it's a shirt that can stand up through all of that stuff without making you feel like you're trapped. And hey, you can look good. Look good in a dress shirt. It's time to feel confident with a wrinkle-free shirt without the hassle. Rhone's wrinkle-free technology makes wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the shirt. It's that easy. That's it. And it has Gold Fusion anti-odor technology to keep you smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, this is maybe the most important thing. It is 100% machine washable. So when you do take that shirt off and throw it in the back of your car, and you're like, oh, thank God, not gonna have to wear nothing for another 6 months. Back to being nude. You can throw this in the washing machine and wash it, and you don't have to like sit there and look at it and go like, ugh, now I got to take this stupid shirt to a dry cleaner. No, Rhone's non-stupid shirts are machine washable. Ditch the dry cleaner altogether. Now that's nice. You can be comfortable. You can be a little mobile. You got some versatility for whatever you're doing. You're going out for date night. You end up at a bar, you're out with some friends, you have to, if you're the sort of person that has to dress up to go to work, I apologize on behalf of the world for you having to do that. But you can do this with Rhone and feel fresh and wear it all day long. The commuter shirt can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to Rhone.com/Jeff and use the promo code Jeff to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you go to RHONE.com/Jeff and use the code Jeff. It's time to find your corner office comfort. All right, we're back. Now, Dave, you obviously you been around the block on the website side of things, but one thing I've always known about you is that you love to game.
I do love to game.
But I feel like you and I have tastes in games that are like
could not be farther.
Yeah.
Could not be a giant gap.
Yeah. So what have you been into lately? At some point we coined the concept of like the Dave game, because it was always like, the Stalkers of the world and the the more weirdly broken the better. And in some ways it feels like that the gaming business has been trending in a direction where games are more broken than ever, but also like that style of game feels like it kind of kept getting a little bit bigger, or just like, the prevalence of Steam just feels like there's just a lot more of that stuff out there. Are you feeling like that, that there's too much for you to play, or are you just being very selective and choosy? And
no, I mean, like, my style of game, I think has always been, I always like complicated games, and maybe like I come at it from the same angle you did, which is like I've been playing everything since in television. And so like at a certain point most games feel pretty similar, and so I always like when they were like just wildly different, and just had like different gameplay mechanics. And so a lot of that tended to come out of like Eastern Europe. A lot of it ends up in like weird strategy realms, right? So I would play a lot of like Paradox titles, or I was the nerd playing like a lot of Dwarf Fortress and stuff, pretty early on. And so like there's tons of those types of games now. Like there's now clones that have fixed all the jankiness, of those types of games, and I go and play them and do whatever. The other side of things that I ended up playing quite a bit of was like I got real big into the sim side of things, and started like I build an actual sim pit, that like let me go spend a lot of money. And I justified it because I think when I'd left Petaluma, like when we were nearby, I was getting my pilot's license. And then the pandemic happened, and so all that stopped. But then like the pilots, like I don't know how much you know about pilots, but they're like the craziest libertarian, like, we own the skies. The world is ours.
I don't need to wear a mask up here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was like just this like group of folks that like I just didn't want to be in a small tiny box with. For a short period of time. And then when I moved, East Coast back to Maryland, the airspace here is completely different. So you've got like the Department of Defense.
Oh, right, because you're like
the Naval Academy. Yeah. So like I suddenly had to change from being like a happy-go-lucky, like I'm flying out of Petaluma, there's not a radio here, like let's fly over the the baseball fields, to okay, like you got to be real careful about your elevation, all this stuff. And I was like, I'm not gonna do it. So I told my wife, I was like, I'm building a sim. I'm gonna build a sim pit. And so I got like all you. Do a bunch of research, you get like all this like aluminum, basically, like the ones that are built right. You don't buy the kits, you buy like these aluminum things and you kind of put it together. And so I started doing that, and in that same European style fashion, I then stopped playing actual like the games as games. So I'd play DCS, but I wouldn't do it to like fight or shoot missiles.
Right.
I just wanted to learn like 1970s computer systems. And I was like amazed that all that was modeled in the game. And so I just spend all my time.
So are you like learning Fortran and COBOL? Like, do you have to, there's like...
It's more like you'd learn how they do positioning, and it'd be like how you'd have to do like these radio signals, or you'd have to like type in these key codes based upon where you are. And so, for example, like I used to fly this French plane, and you'd have to sit on the ground for 7 minutes for it to situate itself to know like, okay, that's where you are, right? And so like you're just doing all this type of stuff, and I go into it being like, hey, I want to, play competitively or like fly and shoot people. But really what I'd end up doing is just spend like 100 hours learning how this weird computer system worked. And I'd actually do it in VR and stuff and sit there and do all that crazy stuff. So yes, I like very strange, like esoteric games on that side. And then I like all the RPG stuff, of which there's, like you said, 1 million of those.
Yeah.
Like the types of games that I always thought were like super small and they didn't make them anymore. Like all those Infinity Engine games, like next thing you knew, you had, too much choice almost to a degree. So it's fun. It's a good time to be a gamer, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels weird. I don't know. 'Cause it feels to me like at the big end, and kind of like still talking to, like a lot of people who are working in games and all that stuff, like the big kind of $70 in-box product, the Halos of the world, the big AAA game industry feels really weird, like, because on that end, it's like the PlayStation 5 has been out for coming up on 2 years now, and it doesn't, in some ways it feels like it hasn't launched at all. Like there are a handful of games out that you go like, oh, you definitely couldn't do this before, but then sometimes you're like, yeah, they just looks kind of like a PC game now, and it looks like a modern PC game now, and it loads faster, and that stuff's great. It's not nothing, but something about it, like the pandemic really threw a lot of things off for big games in a way that it just feels like it hasn't caught up yet, and I'm starting to wonder like when, if ever, things will feel normal on that front, or if everyone's just chasing free to play. I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's probably, you're definitely seeing a lot more games as service stuff, and so like that's the goofy stuff, like you talked about Overwatch, and that's like a crazy one where it's like, I think the biggest question that the internet has is like, did you need to put the 2 on the end of it? Like you could have just said it's Overwatch and everybody would have been totally okay with it and just understood that it was a service game, which everybody's kind of used to at this point. Everybody's pretty comfortable with it.
And making it go free to play, because that's definitely like a pandemic situation in a lot of ways, because originally that game, when they announced Overwatch 2, they were like, we've got this big PvE component, and then you're like, okay, that feels like a sequel to Overwatch. And then at some point they were like, that's going to come later, but we're still going to roll out this other stuff, and we're still going to call it Overwatch 2. And by the way, Overwatch 1 will be going away completely. Which, again, yeah, you're right. If they had just called it Overwatch 2.0 and said, here's our free-to-play update, and we're making these changes, and if you bought the game, you get these bonus items or whatever, people would have been like, oh, okay, like, and inherently understood. Whereas, like, now, I feel like that game's been out for something like a week now, and you still run into people that are just like, oh, wait, that came out? Or, oh, wait, it's free-to-play? Hang on. Like, I got a press release, and you get the impression that they realized that at some point they fucked up on telling people about what that game is, because I got a press release the other day from them. I've been getting multiple press releases from them saying like, hey, here's the broken thing that we're working on this week, and hey, I got one that was just in big bold letters, Overwatch 2 is free to play and out now. like and this is after getting like a week's worth of press releases about phone numbers and battle passes and all this other stuff. They were finally just like, look, just tell people it exists.
It's out. You can go play it.
Yeah. And that's such a crazy situation for a game that got as big as Overwatch did, to feel like now they're having trouble reaching an audience, because you'd think like, a lot of people probably left for Valorant. And
do you think that there's pretty much just like at this point, you can only have like that type of game is a genre style of game at this point, right? It's like whatever Team Fortress ended up becoming is like that style of game. And do you think that there's like, to me it just seems like there's only like one of those types of games, one or two of those types of games that could exist in either one of those, you know, sort of free to play, like always on style games. And like that to me is the biggest change, is like we're just now dealing with it's almost like a sport where it's like you've got the NFL, and if you like that other sport, you've got the NBA. And that's where they play that game.
Well, I mean, that was always the big problem with people trying to run esports websites, is they tried to treat it all like, well, everyone just loves esports. It's like, no, people love football. People love basketball. They don't care about just sports in general. They tune in to see the sports they care about. And yeah, but no, you're right. And I think to a certain extent, that's why I think, you know, like Valorant exists, and that's going to be obviously like a big competitor for something like Overwatch at this point. But you can probably have two, right? Because you have League and you have Dota. So maybe you can have two kind of hero-based, ability-based shooters. But you know, anyone beyond that, you end up in like, you know, Heroes of the Storm territory, or I don't know, Heroes of New Earth or something. You know, and you're just like,
in Heroes of New Earth, they closed that one down.
Shut that
like,
down. Like pretty recently. So, but it doesn't stop developers from spending years of time trying to make a game that they think is going to crack into this market, and that it is, you know, that it's going to make a big difference. You saw, like, you know, like the last game that Cliff Bleszinski did, Lawbreakers, like that game, or I guess they did the battle royale game after that, which is another like very crowded genre. And you know, those games came and went super fast. Like that to me is maybe one of the crazier things, is like, you see developers take years, and, you know, big companies like Amazon taking teams and going like, all right, spend a bunch of time making a shooter and figure out a way to make it something that we can have a big spectator sport and do all this. And then they had a game, I mean, I can't even remember the name of it now, that Amazon launched. Crucible, it was called. And it was out in some kind of preview form. They would let people buy their way into it, and I want to say it made it a month. And they were like, clearly this is not a game you are interested in, so we have decided to shut it the hell down. You're like, what? Like, imagine spending that much time on a product, because, you know, before games were all online and all that stuff, like games would come out and die, but they would still like live on shelves, and you could point at it and be like, that's the thing we made. Nobody bought it, but that's the thing we made. And now, like, if you worked on Crucible, you're like, here's some mock-ups. Here's my concept art that I made. This was in a game at some point. Trust me. Please hire me. But not anymore.
But I think that's more the business side of things changing, right? Like that sounds almost entirely to me like startup culture. Right. Which was basically like, we're going to swing for the fences, because if you actually make it, we're not talking about like, hey, you sold a game and it made some money. It's like you're making $1 billion a year, you know, off whatever that game franchise is. And so they can justify putting that type of cash into it, because that's what moves the needle in like a big public company like that. But it's not, you know, like you said, that's not the goal of probably the people that work on the game, or, you know, something along those. So it does get into a weird territory with it. Yeah.
That's been a hard thing to watch in some corners of the industry, like watching people, you know, burn themselves out for a game that maybe doesn't even make it at all. And, you know, so like some of these games get shut down after like a year or 5. You know, like last week we were saying that like Onrush, the online servers for Onrush are getting shut down. That's a driving game that came out on PS4 like a few years ago. You're like, yeah, okay, it had its run. It was a cool game. I understand why it didn't break through and become a thing that people are going to play forever. But I think the thing the industry is kind of moving away from, or a large parts of it, is like they all want their games to be games you can play forever, because they want that amount of money coming in without having to make a sequel, without having to start over from scratch and sell another thing. They're like, no, we've already got people in here. Let's keep them here with this skin looks like Superman and he can do a ska dance now. And, you know, like all that sort of stuff. It's like in some ways it's like better, because if you like a multiplayer game, there are ways for you to stick with it for a really long time. but how many of those realistically is a person can ever get into, right?
I'm trying to remember what the Ska Dance was. The Skank, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I needed to go back to my
wait a minute here. Yeah.
My lore from 1997 to figure out
rare skank emotes in Fortnite, that they don't even sell anymore. So if you have one, you have to sell your whole account. Yeah, I don't know. It's just such a different business than it was, and like I think
it's just balance. I think what you're describing though is like the AAA side changed.
Totally.
Right?
Yes.
And the other side is the more awesome kind of indie side, which is small. And like you said, every game's almost unfinished. And you see the cooler side of it, which is, hey, those little smaller companies, which I actually prefer those types of games that keep continuing. Like I said, I play a lot of Paradox games. And if you go look at a game like Stellaris over the span of how many years it's been out at this point, like it is every year it plays completely differently,
right?
To a degree that like you can't even follow any sort of YouTube tutorial on it because it changes. And in some ways that's terrible, right? Because like you put all this energy into like actually learning a very difficult game like that, and then it's like it's completely a different game. But at the same time, that's awesome because people are still, putting money into improving it and doing that side of it. So as long as the audience is there, I tend to like that type of model a little bit better as a consumer, right? It's probably not as good for them, and that's why you see companies like Paradox move to, their equivalent of like subscriptions, services for their DLC, and that's an interesting balance that I think we've seen in the industry, is whether or not what's more palatable to the user, and do they actually give you choice? Like, can you just purchase it for a subscription, get everything in there, or do you still have that method to, buy those DLC and whatever? It's a long ways away from the, hey, buy the sound pack for Ultimate 8. You're gonna get sounds when you walk on the coast.
Holy shit. Okay, well, we've got to go get Wait, what do you mean I need a sound card for this? Now what is that? Now what is this? Okay, a sound blaster? Hang on. Yeah, dude, totally. It's just an interesting, because as someone who kind of has always liked competitive games just enough, but not so much that I want to be up here and it's the only game I'm playing and all this other stuff. Like, I feel like I'm kind of caught in the middle in a lot of video games where it's like I'm never going to be good enough to stick with it into year 2 because the only people playing in year 2 are like crazy good at it. And also like I like playing a lot of different games. And so it's occasionally with some of those types of games I feel a little bit left out in the cold, like even stuff like Destiny, and it's not necessarily a competitive game per se, but like every time I get back into Destiny 2, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. Warframe's the same way, to an even greater extent, because I just have played less of it, where I'm like, I don't even, like, there's a whole new wing on my ship here and I don't know what any of these machines do, and now there's a radio station, and it was just like all this other stuff that I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
I always feel like you need like games for the most part, like they've always had better than most industries, like decent onboarding, right? The tutorial is like, it's almost there to a degree that people that play games as much as you and I do, we'd prefer that they weren't there. We're like, dude, I don't need to crouch under this goddamn tree trunk. Like,
trust me, I've done this before.
I know what I'm doing. But it's funny that they don't add the onboarding experience post story and when you get to endgame, right? Where you're like, this is a game that has seasons, and you're like, what does that mean? Like, what do a lot of those things that people kind of take for granted, like Destiny's the perfect one. Like that game, as soon as I finished the story, I was like, I literally have no idea what to do more from this. I assume it's probably like Borderlands, where it's like I could get a better gun, but I just didn't even know. And they don't necessarily set you up well for the social side of it either, which is like most of the times people are, when they're going through leveling, they're not necessarily leveling with a buddy, you know,
Right.
and so you're always waiting for this disconnect for when your buddy is at the same level. Like, what's the perfect time that sort of stuff happens?
Yeah, and they tried to rebuild things in a way that would let more people team up at different levels and have it kind of auto balance. And, you know, like I think so many developers try to tackle that in different ways. I think for me, it ends up being like, hey, you haven't played Destiny. Like they have all this data, right? They know that you have not logged into Destiny for 8 months, or you haven't played Warframe in a year and a half. Like there could be something that says, here's the major stuff that has changed since the last time you logged in. Just like they could look at your profile and go like, okay, we see you have played a lot of other games where you duck under a tree, so we're not going to make you duck under the tree at the start of this game because we trust that you get it. You know, I'm surprised in some ways that like that data isn't getting used to kind of just better onboard people or kind of reacquaint them with a game that maybe has like changed dramatically. The only thing I can think of is like there just aren't that many players that are in that like middle ground where they're like, oh, I like Destiny 2, but I don't like play it every week for the rest of my life. So maybe there just aren't enough players in that middle territory for them to bother spending the dev resources to actually like do that work. But yeah,
when you play like larger level games, they don't necessarily need to be like multiplayer based, but like big elaborate games where they have those types of mechanics. If you go back to them, do you start a brand new character or do you jump in where you were?
It depends. With Destiny, there's really no point in
well, I mean you could,
but like no, since none of the choices you make on your character are permanent in that game, generally speaking. You can respec at any time and all that stuff. So I never really feel like I have to start over. But I don't think starting over would necessarily help because even the content I played when Destiny 2 launched has changed dramatically. You know, like they've rebuilt their onboarding multiple times when they took the game free to play, when they did, or free, whatever, the not quite free to play, but you can still buy the expansions. But yeah, like so even that is maybe not an ideal way to get in sometimes, because the thing that I run into a lot, I ran into this with a game called Tunic that came out earlier this year, where like once you know the secrets of a game, once you half remember them, you are just a complete danger to yourself, where you're like, okay, I think I'm going the right way. No, I've completely done the exact wrong thing, half remembering what I was supposed to do. So like restarting in some of those games ends up not really working out either. When I was trying to get into Elden Ring, I restarted, I think 4 or 5 different times with different characters, trying to figure out like, are any of these characters going to be for me? And finally I hit upon, I forget what it even was now. I hit upon a character and I was like, okay, I'm going to put another 40 hours into this thing. And I was like, all right, I'm good. I
restart all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I find that I get just as far in the game as I did, the original time. And I'm like, oh, that's right. I figured out what this game was. And then realized that it was just going to, be the same kind of over and over for a decent degree.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you end up stopping at the exact same spot. Like that's, there are definitely games that I think like, oh, I'm going to come back to this game. Phantasy Star 2 for the Genesis is a really good one where, like, I remember loving that game growing up, and like I think like, oh, I should go back and play some of that, and then I end up playing like the first hour and a half of it, and then I save my game and go, I'm saving my game, and then a year later I do the exact same thing, get to the exact same spot, save my game again, and go like, all right, cool, man, yeah, Phantasy Star, and yeah, so it just never happens. I think if I played fewer games, then I would have more of a reason to stick with something. But I think, we live in a world where they're like with free to play games, there's so many choices, even for people who are not, like I have access to a lot of video games because it's what I do. But I think even people that don't do that, between Game Pass and all this other stuff, there's just so many different things people could be playing. Like, why stick with something if you're not all the way invested in it?
For sure.
Yeah. And that's kind of a weird one. But let's talk about some games, some recent games. I have been playing Street Fighter 6. They ran a closed beta for that over the weekend. I was expecting everyone and their mother would have access to Street Fighter 6 for this beta weekend, but it sounds like that they maybe did not give out a zillion keys for that thing. I saw some instances of like people purchasing keys from people for way too much money, which is insane.
How's your Honda?
Honda's not in the beta, so so that is like my big question is like, what is Honda going to be like? I figure we're not going to have to wait too much longer here before they start announcing release dates for that, but they had 8 characters in there, and it was really just online stuff, and so there wasn't really, none of the story mode was in there, none of that other stuff, so it was really just get in there and fight other players. And I love this game so much. Holy shit. I could not stop thinking about it. I probably only played about 7 hours of it over the weekend, just because the kids are still sick and my wife is still not feeling great, and so there's just a lot of stuff going on around the house. But like I cannot stop thinking about it. It has got me thinking about like fighting game theory all over again, and all this other stuff that I'm just like, okay, like I need to really think about all of the mistakes I'm making, all of the decades of bad habits I've picked up from playing against drunks in arcades, and really kind of figure out how to like play this game properly. And I will probably never get there, but like that's where I'm at right now in the cycle of fighting game release, is like I'm like, no, this is everything they're doing in this game feels great. It feels like they've got systems in there that are like universal across characters. Like you can hit both heavies at any time and do like this kind of blast through attack it'll blast through a couple of hits and land on the other side. So you can kind of use it in some cases to get yourself out of a corner, get yourself out of trouble, force someone else into a corner, and stuff like that. And that's been a little controversial. Some people have said that thing is a little too like get out of jail free in some situations. I don't think I agree with that, but it's like, it feels like a game that realized that the last game was maybe a little too much for a wider audience, and then really sitting down and thinking about like, okay, this is Street Fighter. This isn't some esoteric thing that we can only, we can afford to only make it for the esports crowd, whatever. Like we've got to try to make a game that has a wide appeal, and it feels like the systems that they've put in do that, and I'm super excited about it.
Do you think that like, getting back to those like genres and stuff of games, do you think that fighting games are esoteric? Like it's weird. I kind of think of them in a degree of like RTS games, almost to a degree, where it's like, look, here's the hugest thing that could ever exist, 20 years ago. And yes, there might be like one or two still going, but they end up at like, just from a skill level perspective, like really only, with a couple different people. And I think part of it's probably just because it's that one-on-one competitive thing to a degree. And it's like, you lose in Street Fighter, you're going to lose a lot. Like none of those games ever had really fantastic matchmaking to a degree of like some of those, top level games. So I always felt like it just left me like, here I am sitting on a couch playing against you, and I was a Cammy player. Mm-hmm. And so like you always had like Honda, I always thought was like a really good counter to Cammy. And so I was just like, well, screw it. I've lost my trick.
Right. Yeah. Like the one thing you had is done. And yeah. No, I've definitely felt that way. And so I think like, yes, for the vast majority of fighting games, they disappear into a pocket where only experts are going to play them anymore. And if you go to try to do online matchmaking, you're just going to run into the same murderers over and over again. I think the games that have like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter are big and mainstream enough that I think they have the potential to break out of that. But it's the sort of thing that like the actual like horrible, maybe not horrible, but the actual solution to that problem is if those games were free to play, you would probably have more churn at lower levels of skill. And so you would have more people just like downloading the game to check it out because there's no barrier to entry. And you maybe would have like a wider array of skill levels that would play the game for a lot longer than they would otherwise. Because I definitely feel like if I'm going to play Street Fighter 6, I need to start playing it day one, because eventually I will get to a point where anyone that's at my skill level will have quit. And so like the matches, so I was having great matches over the weekend where I was losing, but I was close. you know, or matches where I was like, in the first round, I was like, oh, this guy's going to beat the shit out of me. And then I would suck it out at the end. I would figure out a way to, like, I would think about like, okay, what's this person really doing? What can I actually do to stop that? And do they have anything else up their sleeve when I do start stopping it? And I ended up winning some fights. And like, that is the best feeling in the world in those games. When you're like, okay, like I made an adjustment and it worked, you know?
What characters were you maining most of the time?
There's a new guy called Luke, and he sucks. He's just a dick. He's a piece of shit. He's like a PMC guy that also loves anime, and it's just like this worst, like, just what a dick. But he has kind of variants of the kind of Ryu and Ken stuff, a fireball and uppercut, but he's also got like a dash punch that you can do in the air, and it's a little tricky when you do it in the air, and so some of that stuff ended up being really fun, and so I ended up sticking with him a lot, and Ryu. Been playing a fair amount of him too, and because the other new characters are interesting, but like they're just a little bit too tricky. It's like the sort of character that's just like, hey, I've got a stock over here. There's a number on the screen over here that says how many drinks I've had, and if I can have 4 drinks over the course of a fight, then my hair busts loose and then I act crazy. And that's really neat, but it's like it's one too many things for me to keep track of. Mm-hmm. Like characters that have that, I'm usually like, so it's a little more than I want to deal with. But like every character I played, I was like, this, I get why this character's in the game. This character feels cool, but maybe not my thing. And yeah, so I ended up sticking with Luke for most of my time with it, even though he just sucks. That dude just sucks. But he's a fun character. And yeah, so I ended up mostly going with him and had a really, really good time with it. And yeah, I don't know, like you're right though. The big problem is just like, how long do you, and the thing I always tell people when they say like, hey, I'm not really into fighting games. How do I do this? The answer is always find friends that you are like, at least like at a similar skill level, or that you can play casually with and still have a good time. And like, that's probably the right way to play it. Like, you know, I was just recording an episode of the Patreon exclusive podcast that I do with my friend Glenn, who I've known, you know, who got me into this business and all this other stuff. We were kind of talking about kind of the early days of Street Fighter. And it got me thinking about like the best times I ever had with Street Fighter were not playing over the internet. It was
in the arcade.
Yeah, I was in the arcade, or like when it came out on the SNES and we were, you know, 16, but someone found a way to buy a bunch of beer, and there was like 5 of us just sitting around playing that game and getting progressively worse at the game as we kept drinking. And like those end up being the best times. Or like when Tekken 2 came out and we imported a copy, and me and a friend just sat there and did like 50 Kazuya versus Kazuya matches in a row, laughing our asses off, you know, like those end up being the best times.
My guess is, at least I have those same memories, right? Like, yeah. I definitely have the SNES one. It was like, oh man, it's on Super Nintendo. Like, this is, and it's playing decently. But I also remember that there was almost always somebody who refused to play, who was normally like a video game player.
Yeah.
Who like, but when you brought out like that side of it, because, you know, maybe you were playing with one other person, like that was just your, you know, your social thing, and you both got relatively the same skill level. But then you just like throw somebody else in the mix, and then like, what do? You either just like, you're either hopping, you know, in the background being like, no, you hit me, you know, like it was a weirdly hard game to teach. And that's why I think for any of those games to do really well, they need a volume of players that makes the matchmaking like kind of worthwhile, to where, you know, when if you playing, you know, Dota or something like that, you're going to win and lose 50% of the time.
Yeah.
You know, if it mostly, right?
Yeah.
And that's hard to do in something in that short burst like that. That's going to be just 2 minutes, because it's going to be streaky, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's so what they're trying to do with this one is they have a whole separate control scheme in there that they're calling modern. And it takes the, you know, when you play on classic controls, it's exactly what you expect. It's 6-button Street Fighter, all that other stuff. When you play on modern, it's like, okay, now you have a light, medium, and heavy attack, and you have a button that just does special attacks. So if I tap this button, he throws a fireball. If I tap forward in this button, he does a dragon punch. If I do back in this button, he does a hurricane kick. And so they're trying to, and a handful of games have tried to do this over the years, they're just trying to take the execution part out of it and get you thinking more about the mind game, like the mental aspect of, okay, I can do this whenever I want, but when should I do it? Why do I do it? I think it's an idea that's time has come, which is something I never thought I would say. You know, if you like, you know, me of 15 years ago would have been like, that's fucking scrub bullshit. God damn it.
That's not Street Fighter.
Exactly. Get this shit out of it. We're like, no, like it doesn't. I don't think that stuff is necessarily going to give people a dramatic advantage over players that know what they're doing with the classic control setup, and you can matchmake around it if you don't want to ever encounter those players. But yeah, it's an interesting idea that I think this is probably this will be the biggest game that has tried something like that. Like all the games that have tried it so far have been either kind of sub Capcom franchises back in the day or you know, smaller kind of indie games that never really got off the ground. Riot's fighting game will probably end up doing something like that when they finally get it out there. That'll end up being interesting, like, because that's, you know, Riot knows how to do a free-to-play game. They know, you know, all the things they've learned from League. Like, you know, I don't know that it's hard to think about it in terms of it being like a Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat sized game, but like,
I mean, it fits the MO of that style of thing that they do really well. So yeah. I mean, I kind of feel the same way. Like, there needs to be, that genre is ripe for it. It's got everything that matches up with what those types of games as service things. It's just execution side. Somebody will figure it out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I've definitely like had conversations for years with people who have wanted to do it or thought about, you know, like, oh, we got a pitch in place for our free to play fighting game or this or that. And then it just, you know, like for whatever reason, barely ever happens. But yeah, if anyone's going to do it, maybe Riot will be the company to finally pull that off. We'll see. But until then, like Street Fighter, for as disappointing as Street Fighter 5 was, like, this feels like a very welcome, like, kind of back to basics or like a fun first approach, whereas Street Fighter 5 felt like out of the gate they were like, yo man, esports, like their whole thing was like, that's all we care about is professional players. And you're like, great, okay, have fun selling a fraction of what Mortal Kombat sells, because it has a big story mode and people who care about the lore and all that other stuff. But Street Fighter 6 feels like they have learned the lessons from 5 and been like, okay, we need to make a game that people, like actual humans, want to play in addition to the esports crowd. But you know, we'll see kind of how that goes for them. What have you been like really stuck with lately? Is it just pretty much DCS? Like, which modules are you?
No, I mean, I do all that type of stuff. Weirdly, what I've been doing lately is I made so I switched out of my work stuff, and I was like, I got to make a new work computer. Mm-hmm. And forever, I've worked remotely for like the past 10 years, basically since I left CBS. And always you just get the company laptop, right? Which is like, here you go do your dev and all that type of stuff. And it's like, I work from home. You know, maybe I travel once a year to go say hi to everybody or something. But for the most of the time, I'm just sitting at my desk. And so this time I was like, screw it. I'm going to get a desktop. I'm going to make it run Linux, and I'm going to make it run all the games. And I'm going to use the same machine for both.
Yeah.
And so like 2 weeks ago, I put together just a new gaming computer that had, instead of getting an NVIDIA card, I got an ATI card, which is probably the first time I've done that in 15 years, right? And other than that, that was the only compromise that I made. And I loaded up an Arch distro. I put, Genome on it or whatever. I never know how to fucking pronounce it, Jeff. It's whatever it is. Spelled
it's the fun thing about working from home and working alone is just like you have no one left to say these things out loud to.
And so I put that on, and I was like, I know that Steam supposedly runs okay on this stuff, but like I've been working like Linux machines for a few years now, but I'd never actually just tried it out, and it just worked.
Yeah.
Like 95% of the games that I run just work. The only ones that don't are a couple of those larger service games, and it's mostly because of like the anti-cheat stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like I can't blame them. You know, like I don't look at it and I'm like, oh, maybe we need to support like
Linux on the desktop.
Yeah, exactly. I'm more like, hey, I'm happy that I can fit in that world, and I'm happy that everything's moving along, and it's like I know that I'm running on some weird system, and the fact that everything runs as well as it does, I'm like, this is impressive. Like, it's impressive enough that I'm like, okay, between the Steam Deck being kind of a success, and how much that's pushing that stuff, which forces the industry a little bit to kind of have to maybe natively think around things like that. Like, it's a pretty good solution for a gaming machine if you don't need that side of the service level games. Like if you're just playing, you know, your single player games, it'll work perfectly fine, and there's no compromise. It runs, and I was really, really surprised. So
do you go look at do you have to go look at Proton DB before you buy a game and go like, okay, is this, you know, how well does this work? Or, you know,
I'm like you, I've got like a giant library. So, you know, my first parts were like, oh, that runs. Like here's a game I didn't expect to run, and you'll laugh at me for actually checking it out. I was like, I wonder what Fallout 76 is like these days, right?
Yeah.
And so I loaded it up last week, and I was like, wow, everything just works.
Yeah.
Like nothing, no problems, you know, online game, everything worked perfectly fine. Games, even with like little launchers and stuff in front of it. The only ones that, you know, I couldn't get running with like iRacing, for example, which has like this giant Electron app that's going on in the background. Like a couple of those types of games that have maybe super specific hardware requirements or things like that, you know, you'd run into. But for the most part, everything worked really well.
I think that's been one of the most fun things about the Steam Deck is that actually that some of that tinkering process and how they automate or make it very easy for you to like try out different flavors of Proton. And so like, and they're able to react really quickly when they want to. Like when Valve really cares about a thing, they're able to move fast and not move in Valve times. Like Street Fighter 6, that beta ran from Friday morning till Sunday night. And so Friday morning, Street Fighter 6 came out. I downloaded it on the Steam Deck, launched it, got like a communication error, you know, and it crashed out. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try Proton Experimental. No, okay, now it just crashes. Like, okay, well, I guess it just won't work. Then one of their devs just on Twitter was like, hey, we just pushed out a hotfix, and here's a picture of me playing Street Fighter 6 on it. And I was like, oh, fuck. So I went back and updated and tried it. And then I was totally able to play like Street Fighter 6 on a Steam Deck, and it ran fine for the, you know, because it's like 1200 by 800. So like, you know, they can get away with a lot of stuff performance wise, and it ran great. It was like, it's this mind-blowing thing on multiple levels, because it is that thing of like, man, this weird little Linux machine can run these Windows games incredibly well, like without compromise in a lot of cases. And then on top of that, you're like, and they're like performant, and they run like absolutely as you'd expect. And
the reality is too, like, I mean, I'm not going to be like some crazy advocate or something, but like there's also just not a lot running on a Linux system, you know, for the most part, other than whatever you're running.
Right. Yeah.
So there's not like a lot of background tasks that are just happen to be going on. So I'm sure that contributes to it to some degree, but for the most part, I'm just like, I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. Like there's still a lot of, like you said, tinkering that you kind of have to deal with if you want to live in that world. But I was very, very surprised, because I had come from like, oh, I got to install Wine and do all, you know, like I don't have time for a lot of that stuff anymore. And then it all just worked. I was pleasantly surprised.
And it's been the tinkering side of the Steam Deck has mostly been fun because it's like, I wonder if I can pull off this weird thing of like, okay, I'm going to drop into desktop mode and then I'm going to install the Ubisoft launcher and then I'm going to install Trackmania and then I'm going to add that as a non-Steam game. You know, it's like you're back working your way into getting games that are on the Epic Store or on the Ubisoft Store or whatever, and figuring out ways to get those to run. Like that part of the process has been weirdly gratifying too, until the game updates. Like Rumbleverse came out and it worked on the Steam Deck just fine, even though it's only on the Epic Store and all this other stuff. And then they turned on their anti-cheat stuff, and that was it. You're like, okay, yeah, I get it.
But you know what? Given that kind of install base at this point, honestly,
it's like a million of them out there. Yeah,
right. We're a year away from anybody just being able to throw up Ubuntu and it'll just work, you know, and I think it's, you know, regardless of whether or not that becomes the norm, I don't think that, like, I'm not disillusioned in any of those ways, but it's nice that there's like some decent variety out there and that there's some major backing from a couple companies. Like there's a lot worse things that, you know, people could be doing with like large platforms than, you know, trying to put it behind open source models, even if for them it's somewhat self-serving.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's benefiting people like you and that Proton DB site, like seeing all the people that are not using Steam Decks that are still able to benefit from like all of that kind of rapid development on Proton and all that stuff has been, it's been fun to be like a weird part of that, I guess.
Yeah. But game wise, I've been playing, this game Last Epic, which is it's kind of like a Diablo, you know, sort of ARPG. For a while, I had gotten really hooked into Grim Dawn, which was fantastic. Like, if you like that genre and you don't want to like, if you're not playing it competitively, right? Not like doing speed runs and all that type of stuff. If you just like ARPGs, it's like a good way for you to zone out. Grim Dawn was kind of like the perfect game for that. And Last Epic's similar, but you know, just different enough. It's got some neat skill slotting systems that are easy enough to figure out that you don't need to like bring a wiki along with you, right? Which is kind of the hard part, I think, with a lot of these games. Is there's the power of that, like, hey, we're so deep that you gotta like, you know,
follow
look
this
all this
build
stuff
exactly,
up.
and
But then the other bad side of that is the moment somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, they're then into that world, and then suddenly they're like, I don't know, I get like this anxiety anytime that I have like real builds that I have to follow.
Right.
And like, then you don't end up as creative as you probably should be. And then we're all running around with like 3 different builds, you know?
Yeah.
So
I like to play, I like when I can just like, every time I level up, every time I've got skill points to spend, whatever it is, I like to just be able to open the menu and go, what do I need right now? Like, what's the thing that is like, what am I having trouble with? Like, what would be a benefit right now? And it's never the most optimal build. It's always a terrible build. And in games that really want you to have that by the end game, you always end up having to like, okay, well now I guess I have to respec. And then in some free to play games, they're like, okay, yeah, well, let's respec. Give us $8. You're like, okay, fine, okay.
But that one's close to release. Like, I think they're just getting close to like a .9 release. So it's really just adding multiplayer now, kind of that game. Okay, like the game for the most part's finished. But it'll be real interesting because I think Tencent bought, you know, a portion of the company, which is a smaller little studio or something. So who knows? You know, that space is another one that it's like, how alive is it? You know, how long lasting is it? You know, how many games can exist? You know, if there's only 2 games that can live in the ARPG realm, what are they going to be? You know, one's going to be Path of Exile, and it's either like Blizzard can make it work,
right,
or it just spikes for a moment. You know, so who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I have heard good things about Diablo 4. I haven't really seen too much of it. I know some footage leaked out or whatever, but like the people that have been in like friends and family or whatever beta that they've had, I've heard good things. But it's hard to tell sometimes because sometimes those good things are like, well, at least it's not Diablo Immortal. you know, their free to play phone thing. So it's it's always a little hard to tell. Big week for hardware. This is tomorrow is graphics card day. For those who celebrate, I took to the Gerstmann advisory panel, and I put a question to them. And the question was, you buying this graphics card or what? So like this $1,600 NVIDIA 4090 is due out tomorrow, to be on sale tomorrow. And reviews started hitting this morning. I read the Ars Technica review, which was very positive. And that's interesting because I feel like a lot of the sentiment around this has been like, oh my God, NVIDIA is price gouging. These prices are stupid. What are they doing? I can't believe they are going to charge $1,600 for this thing. And so I put it to the advisory panel, hey, are you going to buy one of these? 88%, absolutely not. 12%, I am. And I'm looking through the comments on this to kind of get a sense for, like where people are at with it. And it's a lot of people that just bought one recently, or they're playing most of their games on a Steam Deck now. And so like they're playing a completely different game, like when it comes to power and where they want it, it's obviously like a totally different situation at that point. But also just, it kind of gets back to what I was saying about like AAA games and some of them feeling like they're not coming out fast enough or whatever it is. From Kyle here says, the types of new games I'm playing these days do not need high-end graphics cards to run well. That along with playing more on the Steam Deck, I just haven't seen a need to upgrade for a while. A lot of people that just bought a 3080 or 3070 or some of these other cards in the last, even 6 months or so, basically saying like, no, I don't need this. But I haven't seen anyone. The only justification I've seen is from people who are like, hey, I'm like 4 generations behind and I really want to play VR games.
Sure. I mean, it's always that way. It's like if you've got a big jump, you may as well. But at the same time, I think we're also in like a really interesting time in the industry. And it's definitely been going this way for a while, which is, I mean, when you and I were growing up, like you needed the latest and greatest to run whatever PC game was the top PC game at the time. Like I could, we used to always laugh together and, hey, you had a competitive advantage in Team Fortress on Quake.
Yeah.
If you had a Riva card or whatever, because you could see through the water.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And
transparent water, just the hugest thing in the world. You're like, okay, I know if I jump down there and fire the lightning gun, I will get more kills than I will deaths. So
sure.
Yeah.
And like lately though, there's just not as many games that really push the need. I think like I can't even, I've got a 380 on my like sim rig, and then I've got a 6800 or whatever on the ATI one, and like I've never been in a moment where I'm like, man, this thing's lagging or something. So I think it's just a different time, and probably a lot of people. The other thing too is, man, people use GPUs for more than just games now, and that. Everybody will look to Bitcoin and stuff as the one avenue that people do it. But like, there is a whole lot of people that are doing ML now. And like on the tech side of stuff, like, did you see all that stable diffusion stuff?
So I have stable diffusion installed locally because I have a 3090 in this machine. And so I can generate an image in about 40 seconds.
Yeah. And like, that type of stuff happening will be like industry game changing. They're starting to get the video side of it. Like there's going to be more and more people that are not necessarily gamers that are going to be using video cards. And it's just because there's going to be like a big tech boom of people getting into that level of ML work and forecasting and all that type of stuff. We had plenty of people like at Elastic, for example, that were ML cats, and like they're using these GPUs, or they need to just like, I need to graph a million things on a screen, and that stuff, we've moved pretty far away from our dream of Maya and the reflective ball next to the pyramid.
I mean, graphics card boxes just aren't what they used to be either. We're not getting like, look at this cool lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like they're trying to pitch it a few different ways, right? Because they're like, hey, we've got some pretty hot shit video encoders on here for if you're live streaming, but like they're AV1 encoders, and like Twitch can't accept an AV1 stream right now. So it's just like, okay, that's cool. That's a very highly efficient codec. I think we'll move in that direction. It'll make sense eventually. But like right now, I don't think anyone, you could probably upload an AV1 encoded video to Google, since I think it's their codec to begin with. But or they're one of the proponents of it. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's hard for me because like there's always been that thing of like, well, like you said, I had to run out and get a Voodoo 2 card because I needed colored lighting in Quake 2. And so there's always this pull, even when there's no real reason for it, to go get the newest, latest thing. But at the same time, I looked it up because I was looking up like, well, what power supply do I have in this PC that I bought last year? Because I bought a pre-built because it was the only way to get my once we started working from home, my old 7700K was basically like falling apart. I was just like, okay, this thing is not holding up anymore. It is overheating. I had to replace the cooler on it, and I just basically had to replace enough stuff on it that finally I was like, it's time. I need to upgrade. But at this point, the GPU prices were so stupid. So after tax and shipping, so that added hundreds of dollars to the price. But I looked it up because I had to panic buy a PC last year. I spent $6,000 on this machine. It's way too much money. It's a tax write-off, right? So yeah, I know. No, dude, I know. But like, I was working from home and that computer was falling the fuck apart. Like I could not appear on live streams in a reliable way because of how things were happening. It was just like, okay, I've got to do something about this. And I pulled the trigger on that fucking computer and then had to sit around for like a month and a half for them to have the parts. And then when they finally sent it to me, the 3090 was dead. And I had to RMA it and send it back and get another one and all this other stuff. And it's got a very hot shit AMD CPU in it and all that sort of stuff. It's gonna serve me well for a good long time, I think. But yeah, like that was also at the top of like graphics cards being insanely expensive, which added a lot to that purchase. And so that cuts both ways, because on one side I'm like, well, I already spent like way too fucking much money on a computer. And I knew going in, like, I'm getting fucked over on the price of this PC, but I need to solve this problem as soon as I possibly can. And that seemed like the only reliable way to get a modern video card at that point was to buy a pre-built. And so yeah, so it's like on one hand it's like, okay, I spent way too much money on this PC. On the other hand, I'm like, $1,600 for a GPU isn't that much. I think I spent more last time, which is a terrible situation to be in. Yeah. And so I look at it and go like, there are aspects of that new card that I think I would see a benefit. But at the same time, like the gaming benefit is really not, because like I'm looking at the games they're using to benchmark, and it's older. They're like, hey man, Cyberpunk runs really well. It's like, I don't want to fucking play that game ever again. Like they'll put out DLC, and I guess I'll check it out, but like, that game is still too broken 2 years in, and so it's even the benchmarks being these kind of older games now, it doesn't feel like there's a big driving like, no, this is the thing you need if you want to play this game properly, and you want to play this game properly. And that was always, like you said, like the early graphics card stuff was attached to that.
Yeah, I think we're just at that time where this is probably the first era where I would feel perfectly acceptable getting the last generation and be like, I'm going to be fine.
Yeah.
For a really, really long time. And I think it's now getting into almost like luxury market stuff. I mean, it probably always was. Like it certainly felt that way, like you said, because just the supply problems in the last round. Like it definitely was a luxury. Wanted one. There was, good luck. You either need the time to be able to put into it, or you need to shell out some cash for it. And so now I think Which is a good thing. It's just good that we're at a part where those things have gotten so powerful and so good that it doesn't matter as much, you know?
Yeah, and we're starting to see good competition, at least on the lower end, from AMD and now Intel. You know, they've got their cards coming out that I haven't seen them in person, but it just seems like as more and more people talk about those, they're like, hey, you know, like, look at all the indie games and ARPGs and just like the games that are not going to be big ray tracing powerhouses and all this other stuff, which is the vast majority of games coming out today on PC. They all run great at acceptable resolutions, with all the bells and whistles turned on, with the possible exception of ray tracing in some cases, on cards that are a fraction of the cost of the 4090. And yeah, it's a weird. I think a lot of it ties into just like my general feeling about like, hey, the PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox don't really feel like they've gotten off the ground in the right way yet, and all that sort of stuff. Like the high end, like there aren't as many big graphics powerhouses coming out of big studios anymore. Like those are the games that get delayed. Those are the games that come out, and since they have to run on multiple generations of console anyway, they run acceptably well on a variety of hardware. And so it's just hard. I don't know. It's weird. I want one of these, and I guess I do want one, but I'd look at it and go like, this seems, except for the potential like video encoding benefits and some of that other stuff, like I could talk myself into buying one. But you know, again, I'm in a situation where it is a tax write-off and all that other stuff, but like, it just doesn't feel right.
I just always think back to like that old Next Generation magazine cover that had Unreal on it. Remember? And it was like, this is not a screenshot.
This is a screenshot from the game. You're like, oh my God.
You're like, wait a second. You know, like, I think the other thing that's changed is, and I can't tell if it's nostalgia or not, is like, has things changed so much that my expectation is that we can't actually get, we're not looking for better, you know, powerhouse graphics as much anymore as we're looking for like artistic direction, you know, in games. And so we might be in that post period where like that we've kind of hit the limits, or we've gotten close enough to that uncanny valley, the other side of it, that it just doesn't matter as much anymore for most folks. I'm sure there's still always going to be games that can go and sell at that side of it. Yeah. But more than likely, it's going to have a lot more to do with the software side of things than they have to do with the hardware side of things. You even see that with, you know, there's things like, what are the differentiators between the cards? It's like DLSS or DLSS. Is that
DLSS.
Yeah. So I just think it's going to be a lot more than the, you know, can your Micron computer, you know, handle 90 hertz or, you know, stuff like it was. Because back then the PC mags were essentially like hot rod mags, you know, and things like that just seems to be dying out a little bit, probably for good.
Yeah. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And it seems like you know, one of the bigger selling points of the higher end cards becomes like, well, now you can run this stuff at 4K, or like, hey man, we're getting ready for 8K, and like, fuck that. I'm sitting here in front of this 1440p monitor and stuff looks amazing on it. Like I've got a 4K TV over here that I barely even use. And
is yours in a Ultrawide?
No, I have 3 monitors set up. So I got like a G-Sync, like variable refresh rate, like it does 165 hertz at 1440p. And I think it's the fucking coolest shit that I've purchased for a computer in a good long time, because it's just, you know, being able to run some of those higher frame rates without tearing, without having to hit a VSync friendly refresh rate. But then I've got 2 monitors on the side, to like, I guess 27s that I have turned vertically. So I have an H, like a TIE fighter style configuration, which has been working out pretty well. Except that Windows 11 is a lot better at multi-monitor stuff than Windows 10 was, but there's still some funky stuff because one of the monitors is a 4K monitor, and like the DPI changes, and so like you'll drag a small window off the 4K monitor onto the main one, and suddenly it'll be fucking gigantic. You're like, no, stop that. Just some weird stuff like that. But yeah, no, this monitor I have here. Like, I think if I the only thing I would like to see is if it were an OLED monitor that had HDR support. Like, that would be cool. But that'll probably be next year when more of those start hitting. We say we get into some news here.
Sure.
All right. Overwatch 2, as we mentioned, is out, and it has just been a frustration factory, I think, for a lot of players. When this thing launched, they wanted every player to have a phone number associated with their account. This is kind of in conjunction with the game going free to play and them wanting to find levers to get people to not act shitty. Like, what are some things we can do to get people to not cheat, to not act like an asshole? Like, oh, well, if we make you tie it to a phone number, then we can shut off that phone number and you can't just go sign up for another account on our free to play game when we ban you, basically, I think was the real reason behind that stuff. But I don't know if you ever run into this, but a lot of things that require you to give them a cell phone number won't work with VoIP services like Google Voice or some of the other stuff. So anytime I want to give them my burner number, it rejects it. And I guess this also impacted people that were on prepaid, pay-as-you-go phone plans, because they basically were prevented from playing Overwatch 2. And so it became this weird thing about hey, sorry, your credit rating isn't good enough for you to get a real phone plan, and as a result, you can't play Overwatch 2, which is a really dystopian fucking situation.
Yeah. To me, the whole thing just strikes me as let's give the benefit of the doubt and say that if the phone number is the real reason, it's used as a deterrent. But let's just say that that's a true statement. If that then is a true statement, there's just so many other different methods, I feel, that are passive that they could use, if they're looking for deterrents to keep people from being terrible online, right? Yeah. There's so much marketing information that's coming across the wires and analytics that are coming across that you can look at to see whether or not somebody's a disingenuous player. And the only thing that's stopping you from implementing that stuff is actually allocating people to work on it, right? And come up with those clever things. So I don't know. A lot of it just, I don't want to put a phone number in, to play a video game. Yeah. I think that's just where I come down to. It's I guess if I have to, I'm going to want to, I'll probably end up doing it, but it does seem like a tough way to kind of deal with that type of stuff.
Yeah. And so, as these issues kind of became a bigger deal as more and more players, because even this was impacting people that played Overwatch 1. Suddenly they were like, oh, I can't play this game anymore that I literally paid money for. And so that's been the change that Blizzard made. They didn't say, oh, you're right, we're going to take the phone number stuff out. Instead, they were like, oh, if you played Overwatch anytime prior to us making this change, we're going to grandfather you in with no phone number, and that'll cover the vast majority of legacy players, is how they phrase it. So they're not even really taking a full step back from it. They're just saying, oh yeah, I guess if you paid us, then
But that's, even if it's set at that date, that's the vast majority of probably legacy players that are still active, players or something like that. So, I mean, you got to do what you got to do, but it's, I'm with you. It's a little off.
Yeah. And so another Activision game, Call of Duty, seems to want to do that as well. When I downloaded the Steam version of the open beta, the first time I tried to launch it, it was like, hey, you don't have a verified phone number with Steam, and you need to have one of those. I was like, okay. And so that actually made me feel slightly better in a weird way, because for whatever reason, actually I know exactly which reason, I trust Valve with my phone number more than I trust Activision with it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Yeah.
I just, in any of those types of situations, I'd say, hey, just give me some two-factor thing that you want me to use that generates a code. a little annoying, right? To deal with it or something like that.
Yeah.
That's really a one-way cross of information,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but I guess because you could always just sign up for a new 2FA integrate. If you're like, let's say you're a bad actor and you're like, I'm cheating, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I got banned and I need to get back on. Like, it'd be very easy to go get a Google Voice number to get around it. It'd be very easy. So it's like, I understand on some level, again, if we just take everything at face value and just forget about the whole data collection aspect of this, and just assume that it is purely for anti-cheat purposes, for like enforcing behavior.
I just feel that anybody who's going to all those different levels that you mentioned, which is like, okay, well, we've already got your IP. Oh, but you could use a VPN.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll ban all
VPNs anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay. Well, you don't want a 2-factor app, and you could just set another one of those up, and it's like, okay, that's fine. And then it's like, yes, you're then immediately cheating in that first 1 game, 2 games. Then you've got another, vector that you can look at stuff and look at the analytics of the player, seeing how they're acting. That probably, more than anything, I would assume is going to be the biggest signal, that they can get to whether somebody's a good or bad actor. Because like anybody who's going to go to all that trouble, they can get another phone number, if they want.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and I, they're, with the number of people that are out there making quite a bit of money selling access to cheats and stuff like that, it seems like it would not be that difficult for them to say like, and we'll if anything happens, we'll get you a new phone number that you can give to Blizzard, and it'll pass their bullshit checks. So what do you think about this? I had a conversation with, let's say, someone who worked at a major social network that no one likes. Really narrows it down, I know. That thought like, hey, well,
LiveJournal.
Yeah, it was LiveJournal. It was Orkut. What if we were the arbiters? What if we sat in the middle of all of these gaming transactions and verified people's identities? And so if someone got banned in one game, we could ban them in all games and all of that sort of stuff. Would you suddenly trust, and given which social network this is, the answer is already no. But do you think that is a potential... it's a problem that needs to be solved, especially for these free-to-play games, because people can just create a new account and all this other stuff. Like, I get the idea of like, hey, we need to find ways to keep people from just making a new account and getting back in. But do you think any kind of like, because even if you just got the social network out of it and you're like, okay, just on Xbox, like we know this is your gamer tag, this is your, console serial number, like there are ways that they can kind of imprint that data onto your account in various ways. Like do you think any of that sounds at all appealing, or like at the very least like something you'd be willing to put up with more so than giving them a phone number?
I think it essentially at the end of the day, what you're kind of talking about is like centralized identity.
Yeah.
Which is like whoever is the central point. Could be Mozilla, it could be, good actors, bad actors. Yeah, exactly. Could be like any way, and Gravatar's owned, I think, by like WordPress, like Automatic these days. Yeah. So it could be like any number of those things. And the reality is, whether it's good or not, there's always going to be some manner of problem with it, right? Mm-hmm. Just like your credit score being like centralized, right? Whether you know it or not, like there's always going to be some sort of problem that kind of comes up from it that like you have no recourse towards. And because it hits that many people, suddenly the customer service on it becomes terrible, right? And you end up with like horror stories, which is like, what happens if you lost your Gmail account?
Right.
Like, who do you talk to?
Right.
Hit Google.
I just write support at gmail.com. Is that even a real address? Like, who knows?
So part of me is like, centralization of like, can't somebody just know that I'm me and like that I'm not a terrible person? Mm-hmm. And shouldn't that be like an identity that can just go with me wherever I go? And it's a knowledge base. And to be honest, I think the only way that something like that works is if it's almost like a public good or an open, service thing, because the opposite side of it is just, it's like too much, and that's already where people are getting into trouble, which is like, when we talk about these things of like, why would somebody want, let's say that they're not nefarious. Well, if they are nefarious, it could be because it's just another thing to link across methods, and suddenly they know who you are, yada, 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 all through that. And that's just another form of centralization. So, man, I don't know. I'm somewhat jaded on like the level of internet trust that could exist just anywhere at this point.
Yep.
And even when there are open source equivalents, it's not like people are going to jump to them,
right.
It's really tough. I don't see users doing that. I think it would have to be something a little bit more, ML-y or, something that could just figure stuff out. I'd rather that everybody just figure it out through the game itself and like put you into, you look at games that do it really well, like Dota, where it's like you're in 10 games in the beginning and we're going to figure out if you're a real player or not. And not only that, like where we should put you. And you're outside of the normal population for a bit.
Right.
And then the next part after that is, hey, we've noticed that you're being terrible because we have some sort of reporting that's happening, whether that's automatic on their part or doing that. And then you have shadow ban services. And I don't have any problem with that kind of stuff. Like if you're acting up, I'm sure that there's a lot of false positives, but as long as it's not a stop service thing and you just put it in the corner with all the other jerk, like, just seems like there's other ways to solve this. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like a very extreme step that obviously people don't like. But the alternative has become like anti-cheat stuff. A lot of it is like, okay, now we're gonna like every time you launch this game, we're basically installing a kernel level driver that is gonna authenticate our game and make sure that you're not running anything nefarious under the hood there, and then suddenly you have to basically trust everyone who makes those games to have done that right and not basically installed a rootkit on your own system and all that other stuff. And look at how broken games are when they come out. You really going to expect like that Activision's anti-cheat, the Ricochet stuff is bulletproof and it's never going to, but it's never going to allow a bad actor to fucking gain access to your system because you've allowed Activision in. Like it's not impossible, but it's unlikely. But it's still the sort of thing that when Valorant turned on their kernel level stuff, I uninstalled Valorant because I'm like, I don't care about this game enough to jump through these to feel okay about running this but that seems to be the direction a lot of that stuff is going. And yeah, like I said, Call of Duty seems to want a phone number this year as well. And so we'll probably go through this all over again in a few weeks here when that starts to launch for real. Unless they've figured out a better method to handle it or something. But for me, it's just the privacy aspect of it is just like, but then I just go like, oh, I think about how long I've had this phone number and how many different forms I've entered it into and how much text spam I already get, and it's just like it just feels like a lost cause. It's the thing of not to just fucking go old man crank here with you for a while, but like it's the thing of once a week I walk out to my mailbox, pull all the mail out of it, and immediately throw it all away.
Throw it in the trash. Yeah, I do.
It's like, oh, mailbox is full. Got to go fucking dump all this bullshit out of it. Like, oh wait, is there one thing in here? Am I getting one thing a week that maybe I want to look at before throwing away? Yeah.
I switched jobs, recently, and I needed like the medical card, right?
Right.
Which like. First of all, why do I need like a little shiny piece of plastic in 2022 to have any of that type of stuff? And then the next part was essentially like, yes, we mailed, but I'm like, well, shoot, it's just in there with the trash that is in my mailbox. So I'm kind of with you. I think the reality, all I have to kind of live with is like anything that's going to be popular right? That's going to be tied to whatever mechanisms that are there. They're just going to come with some level of stuff that you got to deal with. And it's kind of up to you to figure out whether you care enough about it or not. I sit in the camp that sounds pretty similar to you, which is like, I'm not paranoid enough to be like, man, I'm never doing any of this type of stuff, but I'm also going to sit there. It does make me make decisions, sometimes. And if it goes too far, then I kind of walk away and I'm like, there's plenty of other choices, so.
Yeah. Speaking of choices, Nintendo has made some choices with the trailer for Super Mario Brothers the movie. Did you end up catching have you caught this trailer?
I did catch the trailer. I've been loving like all weird remixes that kind of come out of it, good and bad, like the ones that are well-meaning and then the ones that are not. I don't know, video game movies, Jeff. Like how many years we've been
they're
just trying not to care too much about it.
They're terrible. Hey, can you on Discord, can you click the noise suppression button and try to turn it off? You're cutting out. I want to make sure we can make sure you're coming through. I think that'll probably fix it. It's next to the like disconnect button on the main interface or somewhere in the settings. If you turn off like noise gate stuff and all that sort of stuff.
Determine input sensitivity.
Yeah, you probably want to drag that in a direction that.
Okay. How's it going now?
That sounds like it's probably better.
Okay. Better.
Better. I think so.
We'll
have to test as we go. So this trailer, it just seems fine. Like you said, it's a video. They're making a video game movie. The bar for that is insanely low, though. I guess people do seem to like the Sonic films as good kids movies and stuff like that. But I thought Jack Black as Bowser did really well, and the Chris Pratt stuff, I'm on the fence because I'm like, if they had just gotten the actual Mario voice in there for a 90-minute film, that would be insufferable and awful. But they spent a long time talking about. They spent a long time talking up Chris Pratt as Mario. Was the thing. It's because people were clowning on him, being like, "Fuck Chris Pratt," which I get it.
And they doubled down.
Yeah, and they're like, "No, he's really been thinking about this Mario voice." And then like he finally opens his mouth in the trailer, and you're like, it just sounds like fucking Chris Pratt, like trying to act like he's from Brooklyn. You might as well just be like, "Hey, I'm walking here."
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously everybody's okay with Bowser because, like, what is the sound of Bowser, right? What is the voice of Bowser? Nobody really has. It's like low grumbling, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense in that side.
And if that movie's going to be kind of a musical, then Jack Black is a good choice for that. I think
I did not know that it was going to be kind of a musical.
I believe my understanding is that there's quite a few musical numbers in that thing.
Wow!
But we'll have to see. But that is Jack Black alluded to it, and in one of the something recently where he was just like, "Oh, I might be able to rock out," something like that. So there's definitely some singing in there somewhere.
I think for me, like the only times when it's been done, decently well, it has been when they're inspirational or, like a Wreck-It Ralph or something like that, where it's like clearly taking homage or something to the form or things like that. And the rest of it is just, you're just going to need to put up with. It's just Hollywood, man. They'll figure it out. Don't get too upset about it.
It'll be very easy to get upset about it and all that sort of stuff. But like, I don't know. I'm kind of whatever about it. But I guess like because Sonic kind of did raise the bar a little bit. Like I thought Ben Schwartz as Sonic the Hedgehog was a really good choice, and that he did pretty well there. So I don't know. And then Chris Pratt getting the Garfield role right after this. you know, like announcing like, and we got Chris Pratt as Garfield. You're like, man, fuck this.
Perfect.
What are we doing?
You're like you're waiting for like the Bruce Willis moment where it's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, like why is Chris Pratt? Why is there suddenly? He's sure he's working a lot. Is there something? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's. I think it's fun to goof on, but I cannot get actually genuinely angry about any of it. I just look at it and shrug and just go like, sure, whatever. I don't know. Kojima's been kind of teasing the next game out of Kojima Productions a little bit. Back at TGS, they had a silhouette of a woman with like a "Who am I?" thing over it, and then PAX Australia came around and they put out a QR code that was a filled-in version of that, and it appears to be Elle Fanning, who I have no idea anything that she's been in. I looked it up, and she's Dakota Fanning's sister. And I was like, okay, huh. I'm just not catching any movies anymore, so I don't know who the fuck anyone is in anything, and it's actually kind of nice in a weird way. And then now they're teasing a second woman that, you know, there were a bunch of leaks, and this woman may very well be Margaret Qualley. Based on some of those leaks, this game may be called Overdose, because I believe, was it Lance McDonald? Someone got a trailer leaked to them with footage of a game, and they did not put the trailer out there. They instead described what they had seen, and some of this stuff is perhaps lining up with a potential horror game out of that studio, which people seem to want based on all that PT stuff that happened on PlayStation 4 when Kojima was going to make a horror game and then didn't, and all that sort of stuff. I don't know. Have you kept up at all with Death Stranding or any of that sort of stuff?
I played Death Stranding. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I sit on the camp of like, and I think I've told you this before. I think all video game stories are terrible, but yeah. I'm the Criterion Collection, you know, like film snob nerd, right? So I come at the art form looking at it as probably too comparative, but at the same time, like I love, like, you know, talk about like going out there and taking like gambles and stuff. Like that's as big of a gamble as I can kind of remember. Sure. You know, like kind of recently, just tone wise, but then also like gameplay wise. And you know, I think you just have to be like, he seems to get stuff out of actors in video games, you know?
Yeah.
Like there seems to be like actual acting happening, and you know, they're interesting, at least from that side of it. Is it, you know, do I think that Death Stranding is like the greatest game ever? No, but do I think that it's like a super duper interesting game? And man, would I love to see more of whatever that guy thinks up? Yeah, absolutely. You know, and so I think it's great. I think it's cool that that they keep moving in that direction and bringing in, you know, Elle Fanning's she's not like the #1 actress in the world or something, but that's why it's kind of cool, is like they're not using it just to sell a game. Right. You know, they're doing it because they're like, no, we want a real tone. We want to hire real, you know, actors, you know, no diss on, you know, video game voice work or something like that. But it's just trying to bring a little bit more of the art form to it. And that's neat. It's admirable.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, like he's obviously such a big movie guy, and I do like that he's not always going after like big name, the hugest name celebrities in the world and stuff like that. Like he just has his people that he sees in something that was like that, you're weird, and I like that, and yeah, I don't know. I'm with you. I think Death Stranding is a fucking terrible video game, but yeah, and the story is like abysmal. But I appreciate that it at least exists. And I appreciate his ability to like get Sony to provide some level of funding for that and an engine for that weird fucking thing, and it ended up doing really well for them in the end. And now, you know, you've got leaks, or you know, you've got actors saying like, oh yeah, we're doing Death Stranding 2, which is like, what the fuck would that even, you know, like, what, are you gonna walk back? No, you already had to walk back in the first game. So like, what, you know, what, this time we've got to walk across Canada.
we found a new ladder. You know?
Yeah. Yes. Oh man.
Impressive ladder technology that's been made that can go across even smaller streams that look insurmountable.
Okay. Now I'm on board. Now I'm in. Yeah, I appreciate that after all these years, he's still able to, able to like run a studio and have people take him seriously and make games. I just, when I think over the years about the games that Kojima's name has been on, by and large, I go like, yeah, most of these are not good. but the Metal Gear Solid games that are great are really great, and also weird in ways that other games aren't. And it's great to have more of that, especially in like a big budget or a bigger budget sort of way. Not like Death Stranding like broke the bank. My understanding is that, when Sony invested in it, they knew what they were getting into, and they're like, you can have some money, but we're not gonna just fucking...
You're our weird auteur.
Yeah. We're gonna write this off as a loss right now and just give you this money and go make your ladder game and we'll fucking figure it out later. And then when it blew up, they're like, oh great, we're so smart. Weird. I don't know. Origin, everyone's favorite Electronic Arts client, is getting replaced by the EA desktop app, which they have been running in beta for a very long time, and I've run it a few times over the years, and it just kind of seems like the same thing. I don't, but for the longest time, like they were like, oh, this game isn't supported by the EA desktop app yet. It only runs in Origin. So if you want to play this game, you got to install the old client. I guess now that they're coming out of beta, they've solved whatever those tech issues were. But then I went and installed the EA desktop app after reading this story, and I looked at it, was just like, yeah, I don't know, I guess it's like a slightly lighter weight version of the Origin client. Like it just doesn't have the Origin branding on it. Like, okay, like what? Who
can I play games that have like Kilrathi in it? Like that's
relaunch the Origin client that will, when I click this button, Crusader No Remorse launches.
Yes.
And then I played some of that on the Steam Deck.
Did you play No Remorse or No Regret? Wasn't No Regret the second one?
Yeah, I think No Regret was the first one, and No Remorse was the second one. I forget which was which now.
I have a feeling like wasn't the first one really good and the second one was just kind of like,
yeah, it was like it felt mission packy in a way where it's like, okay, the things you added are maybe not that great. And then they were going to do Crusader No Mercy as a third game, and then that never happened. They did that game on PlayStation 1, and I remember being psyched because like, oh cool, I can play it on a TV, and it's just the controller controls for that were so not bad. Like they did what they could with what they had to work with, but it was just like, okay, this is not how I want to play this game at all.
I'd love to see like a Wolfenstein style reimagining of the Crusader universe. Like, could you imagine that? Like just like a hard boiled, like you never see him take his helmet off,
just scenery chewing cutscenes.
Just like he's smoking cigars.
Somehow through the helmet, he's got a fucking port on the helmet that he plugs a fucking vape into, and I would
and then there'd be like other Crusaders that have like different colors, you know,
right?
Like they'd all have different paint schemes, and he's just like he wears red.
As an homage to the original Crusaders, but also easier to clean. Sure. I would fucking pay $60 for that game immediately, no questions asked. But it sounds like they may be moving away from some of their app stuff in general. It sounds like Dead Space, when it comes out in January, will be like native on Steam and won't necessarily need another launcher. That's been like one of my least favorite Steam things. And I'm sure like you playing games on Linux, it's probably like one more weird hoop to jump through in some cases where you have to launch a launcher and then launch the game. And hopefully we'll see EA kind of move away from requiring more of that stuff in the future. I thought that was interesting that Dead Space will not require the Origin client at all. And so if that ends up being the benefit of replacing it with this EA desktop app, is like we can just get more of that crap out of the way, then I'm all for it.
I agree. I mean, hopefully, the gaming side of the industry, it's always maybe a little bit more progressive and learns things a little faster. Like, the hope would be like, hey, games have learned the multi-client, sort of thing to a degree. Yeah. And it's like, we now see the fracturing on the video side of things with the decableization of cable and, all that type of stuff. Like, it'd be cool to see all that make its way across the board.
Yeah, I mean, you have plenty of situations where, like, once you've tied, like, basically said, like, oh, you need to have an EA account to play this game. Like, okay, let me log into it once, and you say, okay, this is your Steam account. Now we know that, and we'll know that for every EA game you buy from here on out. Like, plenty of console games do that. Like, you create, like, a Warner Brothers account once for whatever Mortal Kombat game comes out, and then the next time you launch it, it's like, we know who you are. And you're like, really? I don't know that I like that, but I like not having to fill out this form again. So
it's all Gravatar in the background.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I went to go change my Gravatar the other day on an email address and realized how much of a hassle it was now to sign up for a Gravatar account. And I was like, nah, fuck this. So, it was a bummer. Steam Deck orders have completely caught up. When I bought mine, I had to sit there and wait months and months and months for the pre-orders to catch up. And then suddenly, all at once, now you can just go click a button and they'll ship it to you in 1 to 2 weeks' time, which is...
That's kind of bananas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel like weird that we're in a world where like Steam's kind of figured out hardware a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, when you think about the number of different times they've tried...
Yeah, they never gave up, man.
Yeah, like the Steam Deck wouldn't have happened if Steam Machines wouldn't have happened, because that inspired them to give a shit about Linux in the first place and all that sort of stuff. But they now have, like, the Valve Index is a quality VR headset, and it sounds like that they are working on another one that will have like guts inside of it. I mean, they said as much in an interview that, like, hey, the work we've done on Steam Deck will actually be very informative in the future for what we want to do with VR. Which seems to imply that they'll have a standalone headset that can run games itself, that maybe also you could plug into a PC if you want the power, if you need that additional power there, which is sort of like what Facebook, they just announced this morning, the Pro version of the Quest headset, which is the same type deal. It's got its own guts in it, but you can still wire it up and play your Steam VR games, just fine. They also took this opportunity to launch the dock, which the dock got delayed from the initial Steam Deck launch, and it's a nice drop-in dock that I ordered one. It's $90, which is too much money for a fucking dock. But then I was like, well, the ability to just drop it in and have it charge, which a lot of these other decks don't, or a lot of the other docks that have come along, they're just built for MacBooks and stuff. Like, they don't do that. So I don't know. That seemed like an okay feature to have, even if I'm not really looking to wire it up to a television or do anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's been funny with that side of stuff because everybody's always, they're like, oh yeah, it costs $90, but it's like, dude, if you get a dock for your computer or your laptop,
yeah,
like you'd be amazed at what people pay for like a ThinkPad, like dock or something along those lines that have pretty much almost the same connections in them. I'm not saying it's not kind of ridiculous, but it's also just kind of like a nice to have, I think, for a lot of people, so it doesn't, that side of it didn't bother me as much. I'm still amazed that they cost what they do, just for the base platform, end of day.
Yeah, I mean, especially, you start taking into consideration against, like, let's say a graphics card that costs the same as like 3 Steam Decks. You're like, huh. Yeah, when you think about the level of games that people are playing these days and the graphical quality, you're like, Steam Deck runs this stuff pretty well. Nintendo seems to have made an update to the types of games it will allow on its store, which I guess this is kind of, it's surprising to me on both ends, because if you looked at the eShop on the Switch, there was just a sudden increase in the number of like weirdly porny anime games that like Nintendo was letting appear on its store. And you think about what Nintendo has been over the years and their feelings towards that type of content in games and even violence in games, going back to, Mortal Kombat 1 and stuff. It just felt very unlike them. But the adult game publisher Gamuzumi, according to Eurogamer, they told fans that they heard back from Nintendo after facing an unexpected delay in the launch of its most recent title, Hot Tentacles Shooter. And Gamuzumi Gamuzumi describes itself as a boutique publisher focused on releasing mature or H games, softcore hentai games. And I guess Nintendo has finally ruled that games featuring topless anime women are no longer allowed. Another game by this publisher got blocked. This game is called, I just liked the name of some of these games. That's the only reason I pulled this story. This other game is called Elves Christmas Hentai Puzzle.
It's fun because, like, is it, a possessive? Like, is it the elves who owned the Christmas?
Yeah, is it their Christmas? There's no apostrophe in the Eurogamer story, so we're left to just, like, think, like, it's
use
Elves
our
Christmas.
Imagination, yeah.
Elves Christmas is separate from regular Christmas because it's more, it's got more hentai in it. Yeah, I don't know. Like, there are a lot of weird situations with Nintendo's storefront for a long time where you would see indie games, like, launching at a high price and then always being on sale. So when you went to the sale page on the Switch storefront, it was always there like, this game's 95% off. Like, oh. And like ways that publishers would game it to make sure that their weird little porn visual novels were suddenly getting surfaced in ways that they probably shouldn't.
Yeah, the surprise there is not so much that, Nintendo gets rid of all this stuff. It's more like how they seem more buttoned up than you'd expect to be able to handle, like, their own store, that it's just fairly loose controls on it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I know that they do sit there and approve a lot of stuff. So at some point someone had to look at this and go, yes, we are okay with these games going on the store. And then I guess, Nintendo hasn't made any kind of comment saying, hey, we've made a change. It just sounds like they realized what was happening and went like, oh, fuck. Okay. All right. Yeah, we don't want this anymore. Which is probably, I don't know. It's probably the right move. I go back and forth on this sort of stuff because Steam is so rotten with porn games, and I've started playing some of them here and there just to get a sense of, like, what is this? Like, what is this
why
like?
Should I care?
Yeah, like,
why is this showing up as much as it is?
Right, yeah, and it's because I keep testing them out and finding out that they're all terrible. And I was like, oh, you seem to play an hour and a half of hentai survivors, so why don't you check this out? And I'm like, great, I'm just doing it to myself at this point. Like, the recommendation engine is working as intended, I guess. And I don't know, a lot of these games are bad, and I think that they should be better. That's actually my take on this. Isn't that people shouldn't make porn games, it's that they are terrible video games, and that what if they made them better, but they're never incentivized to make them better.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think it's just kind of pipe dreamy there on that side, Jeff.
I don't know. Yeah, I just want quality adult entertainment. That's all.
You want, like, a nice, like, VHS 1983 logo to start them up.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, I want the appropriate level of music that goes with that. I want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want Joey Silvera to star. Who's the Peter North of pornographic video games?
You want somebody playing, like, two twins,
yes, exactly.
at the same time.
Yes, and then they wear a wig in one of them, and then there's one shot of them together, and it's like the worst looking shot in the world. And all that sort of stuff. It's just fascinating how much of that stuff is on Steam, and I think that stuff should exist. I'm not saying, like, they need to stop making porn games. It's just like some of them are so, when it's just like, I don't know. Like, is there a game on Steam called, like, Hitler Fucker 3 yet? It seems like that probably exists by now, and will shortly. If it doesn't yet, then I think we just willed it into existence. So you're welcome. Because people just, there's just a weird lowest common denominator thing happening out there with a lot of this stuff that I don't know. In our last news story, Brazil was one of the territories that was really digging into this proposed acquisition, where Microsoft has been looking to buy Activision Blizzard, and some of the kind of antitrust organizations around the world have been like, hey, wait a minute, we want to think about this. Brazil was one of the first ones to come up and say, like, hey, we want to take a closer look at this. They have since approved it and said, like, no, we think it'd be good. This is according to videogameschronicle.com. And basically what they've said is that, they believe that Sony could compete even in a world where Call of Duty did become exclusive to Xbox consoles, which is not at all what Microsoft is saying they want to do. They're saying, no, we want to put this on as many platforms as possible because that's how we get our money out of it. And, essentially what Brazil has said, like, hey, even if that went away, Nintendo doesn't get Call of Duty and they're still plenty competitive. So why wouldn't Sony be? Which is probably the right take on that. It's been it's been like acquisition season for a good long time in video games. I mean, you and I have been through enough acquisitions, I think, in our weird end of the world, to where I feel like every one of these I hear about, just a shiver runs down my spine about like, oh, that thing's fucked.
Yeah.
In this situation, Activision was already kind of fucked, and maybe Microsoft
I just
can
like
unfuck it.
That Brazil is like the main arbiter at the moment, where it's like it's cleared. It's cleared everybody, but Brazil's now okay.
Yeah,
so,
and we'll see. The UK had also been the big kind of stick here in terms of going, hey, hang on, wait a minute. And so Sony has been kind of like prodding this on by saying like, oh, Microsoft made us an offer for how they want to bring Call of Duty to PlayStation for X number of years, but it's not nearly good enough. And so that's been their approach on basically trying to gum up the works on this deal as best they can. I can't imagine they're going to stop it, especially now that Brazil is said like, hey, actually, fuck you, this is crazy. But yeah, I don't know. We'll kind of see it as it moves forward. They were always, I think, when they originally announced the deal, that they were looking to hopefully, get it done sometime next year anyway. So this isn't necessarily pushing back the timetable of any of this stuff. I guess according to Video Games Chronicle, the UK has announced that they have a deadline of March 1st to publish the findings of their inquiry. And the US looks like it could rule on it by late November. And Saudi Arabia said that they have no objection to it. So, a lot of the companies around the world or a lot of the governments around the world that apparently care about this sort of stuff. Like, antitrust is a good thing, but it's been gutted so many different ways nowadays. Like, it's hard to feel like any of this matters. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and in other weird ways, it's funny. Another thing that I wouldn't have said like 15 years ago, but it's like Microsoft's not a bad steward these days as far as like terrible, big giant companies and stuff. Like, for as many, they've bought fairly large platform things at this point and been like kind of okay with it to a degree. Yeah. I don't think that that anybody would see necessarily anything earth-breakingly bad come out of these types of situations. I think it's more just kind of disheartening that it's the way that the world is to a degree, that the level of independence is just somewhat eroding. But
I guess so. But like at the same time, like it's people get payouts, like, right? They sell their company. Some people somewhere in that chain make a bunch of money. They work out their contract, and then they say, all right, now I'm going to quit and go do it all over again. And so we're seeing, like after a company like Respawn gets, picked up by Electronic Arts, you have some people that left there to go start their own studios. And so, you have like the Dead Space devs are doing it somewhere and they're getting funding from somewhere else. I think the end result, though, is that everyone's just getting funding from Tencent. And so you have all these like new studios springing up that are trying to make big games that are maybe like the games they made at their old studio that their old studio doesn't want to make anymore, and all that sort of stuff. But then at the end of the day, you look into it and they're all like, oh yeah, we're like 8 people in this room here, but we're looking to hire 50 more because Tencent just made a significant investment in it too. So like that to me is the disruption in that cycle. Cause that's like that would be the virtuous cycle, right? Is like people cash out.
Sure.
They go start their indie company. They do it all over again. They sell it, they cash out, or another layer of people are brought up to a level where they make money on the sale, and so they get to cash out and go start their studios, and so the cycle kind of keeps going. But then you have that disruption of just like, then Tencent is suddenly, or Embracer Group or some of these other weird companies are coming in and being like, hey, we got all this Saudi money and we're just going to dump it onto your studio, and now we own 40% of it or whatever it is. And it's just it's another one of those things you go like, man, this business got strange over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think it gets back to some of those earlier discussions. It's like there's just a lot of more money in it.
Yeah,
you know.
totally.
I think the better parts are, when you look at those things, like where you get a lot more choice these days too. So you can always jump on Steam on your weird Linux machine and, jump on some indie game if you want. And, the worst thing that's going to happen is that game gets really big, like you said, gets gobbled up and begets maybe another couple indie games. But we don't seem to be stopped in any way by like innovation, I guess, happening within the game space. I think it's more the service level side of games is a little shakier. See what happens there in a few years.
Yeah, you're right. And that's it for news. So why don't we get into some emails here? What do you say?
Okay.
All right, we'll take a handful here. podcast@guard.bike is the email address if you want to send in your email. This all came together fast. It was a domain I already owned. It just ended up happening that way.
Couldn't get thwomp.com.
No, I looked it up too. Disgustingly, like at one point I was like, I wonder, like I thought about writing Tatum and being like, hey, who owned whatever happened to some of these domains? But actually the real question I had is whatever happened to WrestleFury? Who owns WrestleFury.com?
Did you do a who is on it?
It's all.
I'll do that while you.
It's all locked down stuff, but so I don't know if maybe Shelby still has it or if it ended up going to CBS in the sale, if they ended up just dumping domains on them too.
Yeah.
I still have all the domain. I had a list of domains that we registered. That were like when we had the idea of like, what if we did franchise specific wikis. And so it was an interesting list of like franchises I thought warranted a wiki in like 2009 or 10.
How did it hold up?
It was about a 70% hit rate. But then there was stuff like wolfbomb.com for like a Wolfenstein wiki that like, yeah, they made some of those, but maybe not enough of them that you needed that. That's the only domain. I got an email from, this is near the end of the CBS era before it got sold to the other people. Like someone in legal hit me up and said like, what are we doing with this domain? A friend of mine wants it for a band or a record label, something. I forget what it was, but it's just like, he just wanted to give it to some buddy of his. And I was like, yeah, I mean, we are not going to use wolfbomb.com. So go ahead. But it's like rockbandbomb.com and all that other stuff. I think that there's room for high quality franchise specific wikis out there. But unfortunately, there are already a ton of really low quality franchise specific wikis out there that have probably already sucked up a lot of the SEO or whatever. Oh, well, what are you going to do? Build a guide system, I guess. Anyway, podcast@guard.bike is the email address. And you can send in your emails there. And I will occasionally read some of them, as I have with these. I'm going to drag this window over here so I can see it better. Joe in Seattle writes in and says, how does Blizzard get DDoSed? I've never seen. So that was the part of the Overwatch 2 launch was also, they claimed that they were getting a lot of denial of service attacks on them on launch day, in addition to some of their kind of login servers maybe crumbling under the load, that this was also happening in the background. So I've never seen something like this with a multiplayer game. Can you think of something like this happening before? How does someone pull off something like this? The disruption has been so crazy. I don't really believe people saying it's just Blizzard making excuses. Also, the game fucking rips. I love what I've played of it after being in queue for 77 hours or whatever. The haters are wrong. That's the second positive thing I've seen about Overwatch 2. I feel like the people have been pretty down on it generally, but anyway, yeah, I'm trying to think of other situations. There was the big Sony outage when like Mortal Kombat and the last SOCOM game were coming out. They had to take it down because of some hack. But that wasn't a DDoS.
DDoS has happened all over the place, not in the gaming, realm. So I mean, to answer the question, basically being like, how is this possible that this can happen even at big companies? Like, yeah, it happens all the time. Happens to GitHub, and they're owned by Microsoft, and they're sort of a backbone of the internet at this point. So it's it's not uncommon. I think the bigger things with a lot of security prevention type of stuff, and speaking to somebody who was in that industry for a little bit, like it's not the most. It's not where people are putting their money, right?
Right.
A lot of the times. And so it also requires like somewhat round the clock, you still need humans watching stuff occasionally. So when those things happen, and I mean, Jeff, you can remember it even when we were building Giant Bomb or something, and be like, even if we just got high traffic and it was unexpected, you would see parts of your system that just hadn't been touched before, and they were obscure, and you didn't really know that they'd happen. Is it the chat system? Is it the front end? Who knows? And sometimes, unfortunately, like the only way that you learn those things, especially when you're building brand new types of systems, which, hey, might be happening in a lot of these live service games, like I think you just gotta give them a little bit of a break on any kind of launch. Like I never understood, and maybe it's just because I'm close to it. If you want to play, if you're really, really interested in a video game, day one,
like the number of people who are like, I scheduled a day off for Friday when this game launches, and I'm mad because I couldn't play it. It's like, just don't do that.
Yeah, and just cut them some slack on it. But it's certainly possible that stuff can happen.
I think about the number of times that the site went down for all sorts of, a lot of times it was chat, because it would happen around E3 every year, which was always like, hey, we are expecting more traffic than normal, and people would make estimates and go like, well, based on the traffic you get day to day, which is like might as well be zero, we think you'll be fine. Like, no, we're not. We were not fine most of the time, but I mean, and that was the thing back in the GameSpot days that happened all the time, is like marketing and sales would want a shiny new version of the site to go around and sell to people at E3 time, and so they would always schedule big rebuilds and redesigns of the site to launch at E3. So it's like, now we've got untested tech launching at the highest traffic time of the year, and the highest publishing time of the year, that the editors are putting the most videos and stories through the CMS and all this other stuff. And the number of ways I've watched that site break at E3, like Giant Bomb, would have a few problems here and there, but it was almost always chat until it got rebuilt in a way that was like really, really good there near the end. But the GameSpot stuff was almost always like a marketing driven crash where they approved some kind of big rebuild, or like, oh, you're part of ZDNet now, and now you need to redesign to use the ZDNet CMS, and it's the worst thing you've ever seen in your life. And like all that sort of stuff was depressing. Avoidable was always the thing I would look at and go like, this didn't have to happen.
So tech, long story short, tech's going to be tech. Expect it. The bigger your service is going to be, the more actors that are out there are probably going to be malicious, and probably the more likely somebody's going to be a smart bad actor, right? And be able to break your stuff. Yeah. So
we would have the site blow up. Sometimes like someone would just be like scraping it or like spamming it, and that would be enough to like, okay, well, login broke because they're hammering that aspect of the site so hard, and like some of that other stuff. A lot of weird stuff over the years. Will from Kennewick, Washington writes in and says, I heard you mention that one of your kids was watching Blue's Clues, which I thought was an old show that had already finished, but I guess a new version is currently airing. Got me curious whether there were any older kids shows you pick out personally, or if it's more just whatever is featured on streaming services or whatever that they gravitate towards. So yeah, this has come up, like, my daughter's 3 and is what, we have TV on in the background a lot. It did for the longest time. It was Baby Einstein, and then she kind of graduated out of that into stuff like Bananas and Pajamas and Blue's Clues. We've watched a lot of Mr. Rogers around here, and that's been nice. I was talking about some of the stuff that's on YouTube that parents just will plop their kids down in front of, like Coco Melon and some of this stuff that feels like it's generated by like a malevolent AI. Because it's such nightmare material. What we've mostly gone with older stuff that we can just get our hands on one way or the other, and and Mr. Rogers and has been really good for that. Some older Sesame Street stuff has been nice as well. Peppa Pig getting some play around here. But what did you know, your kids are
my
like,
kids
now,
are a little
like,
older
yeah,
now,
older now.
Now they start getting into like sort of fun stuff that kind of like you can enjoy a little bit. So like the ones we liked were like Odd Squad, the Investigators. There's like a couple, good that they're decent enough where it doesn't. Sometimes I feel like the ones that make references to the adults, I feel are almost exploitive of the children. Like, you don't know what you're saying. You don't understand this reference,
Right.
to a degree. But a couple of them are pretty clever. But those are the ones normally whenever you stick with, at least in the States, like any of the PBS stuff, you're normally in a pretty good spot. But yeah, I don't know. I think what's interesting for me is I'm now at that stage where the kids are now, I'm trying to bring my nostalgia back to the kids and be like, hey, let's watch Ghostbusters, right? And you're like, how did I watch Ghostbusters like when I was a kid? And I'm like, oh man, I missed this joke where like Dan Aykroyd was essentially like having sex with a ghost or something. And it's like you just didn't recognize that, as a kid or something. I even tried like Spaceballs. And that one just, I was like, oh man, that one probably shouldn't be in there. So I don't know, man. Everybody, the kid stuff, you find your favorites, and normally your kid's going to get on whatever it is, your kid's going to find something that annoys the hell out of you, and you're just going to watch it like ad nauseum over and over.
Yeah, we definitely went through part of that. And I think the annoying part is like, we're trying to find something that she will watch, but not completely zone out and go like full like cult status on it. There's a couple things that we put on for her that just it absorbs too much. Like she will stop responding to questions from us because she is too busy staring at like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood and stuff like that. I was like, okay, that one maybe is over the line for now. And we'll put on. She's a big fan of Frozen and a lot of the Disney princess stuff. She's way into that because my wife. I was like, let's try to keep Disney out of it. Oh no, she's the biggest Frozen fan in the world. Okay, well, all right.
It's impossible. Yeah, good luck.
I know. Yeah. And now that we live this close to Disneyland, like it's just like, okay, well, this year's not the year for that, but maybe next year. I think when she gets to be around 4, that'll probably be the right time to take her to Disneyland. And yeah, so we've been trying to find stuff that like is engaging because and I've heard about a show called Bluey that we haven't really checked out, but I've heard good things.
Bluey I was talking with somebody else about like, I was like, they were like, oh, I hate Bluey. It was this other dad, and I was like, why do you hate Bluey? And it's like, it's just got like the most perfect ever present father. It's like, I was like, oh yeah, like I can get that. Like it's like, yeah, no, let's make this a game. Let's just go do something. It's like, oh man, like where's that guy with his cigar break?
Right. He's just like, I'm gonna go out for some smokes, and then he never came back. Yeah. It's been interesting because I it's a lot of stuff that I hadn't watched. My wife's a little bit younger than I am, and so she just has like a little bit of a different reference point for kids programming than I did, and yeah, so it's been interesting. Like she's like a big Raffi fan, and so we've been listening to a lot of Raffi and stuff like that. And for me, like I just never was exposed to any of that as a kid. So yeah, it's just sort of a different sort of thing. Nick in Detroit writes in and says, when I was in 6th grade, I remember reading in Game Pro about how Nintendo was blocking the Game Genie from being sold in the US, but you could buy it in Canada. I then made it my main objective to get one when I found out we were going on family vacation to Canada. After returning home, I was the coolest kid for like 2 days at school because I brought in the booklet that came with it, and I had this weird device that let you mess with Nintendo games. The most ridiculous part of it looking back was when we were crossing the border back into the US. I was terrified that the border guard would somehow find out I had one and arrest me. Other than software piracy, is there anything either gray or straight up illegal that you've done related to games, especially at a younger age? I don't know. I'm not really looking to narc on my, anything here, but not probably, the closest thing I got was when, there were those years when I was going to Tokyo 2 or 3 times a year and was just bringing cash and buying as much video game stuff as I could. And then on the other end of that, you have to fill out a customs form about what you bought, and they want you to put in the value of stuff. And there was always like, like if you go over this amount of money, they're going to pull you aside and hassle you. And it's like, okay, I don't think I actually ever went over that amount of money, but it was never the games. It was the guns. It was the airsoft guns. Bringing those back into the US always felt like, all right, if anyone looks in this bag, we're all going to jail. So even though they were theoretically legal to import, I don't know. It was always a weird thing. But I can't think of anything. I mean, gray market. I mean, importing was always technically something of a gray market, but never really illegal. What about you? You're
Mine were always various ways of, it was like software piracy, right? But it was, I think the more interesting sides was like how that evolved over time.
Yeah.
Like if you were a PC gamer, that was just part of doing business, right? Like you were, I remember being a kid and you just bring floppy disks, to school, right? And like that's how so much of that stuff got around. And to be honest, like the industry to a degree supported parts of that through things like shareware, right?
Yeah.
Quake being like kind of the last game, I think really that was like a major game that came out in that kind of style, which is like, hey, here's the first part of it, kind of for free, give us a key or whatever and you get the rest. So I can definitely remember that side of it for sure. And then the rest of it was, mostly like once the internet came around, there was a really, really weird period there for a while where you had the CD-ROM era, right,
Yeah.
which was coming about, and the games were just getting bigger. And when you try to get these, if you were trying to engage in some sort of gray market or black market type stuff, it was mostly that you had to like put a lot of effort into getting those games, and it was really easy. Later when you'd find out like, well, why did everybody start moving to something like Steam or something like that? And it's like it was just so much easier. I don't want to have to deal with this ratio of like some FTP. Like, what am I putting on and getting back out? And I think that's what I took away from it was like, dude, if you just make it easy for people, sell things at a fair price, they're probably going to change their ways. And kids are just gonna be kids,
Yeah, you get to that point where you maybe have more money than time, and so the time it would take to go dig out. I think like probably like one of the last games I would have pirated or something might have been Quake. It was a weird situation where like I ordered a copy of Quake and it took 6 weeks or something for them to send out the CD. And in that time, Quake came out and the full version was floating around online. And for me, this was like, even before, I got on, I think I got on the actual internet like in like late 92 or maybe sometime in 93 with a dial-up shell account. And back then it wasn't even ratio FTPs or, it was kind of beyond BBSs back in the Commodore 64 days. It was more like you would find, like if someone would give you a text file with a bunch of FTP addresses in it. And then there would be like these paths, these directories that had impossible characters in them to better hide them. And so you would see directories that were like, the name of the directory was ... which is normally how you go up a directory.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to type that in quotes so that it would know that. And there'd be things like, hey, by the way, the space in this directory name is a shifted space. So you have to hold shift and push space. And then they would just hide.
It's a right arrow quote.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so people would just hide pirated games on public FTPs. And so you would log into some university FTP and just like go to this directory and see if it still existed. Because after it blew up big enough that the administrators noticed the bandwidth, they would shut it down. They'd be like, what the fuck? Why is this spiking? Like, oh, hang on. Why are people downloading 1 billion copies of fucking full version of Duke Nukem out of here? Like, what the fuck? and they would shut it down. And so but 10 more sites would have popped up by then. So as long as you had a way to get the next text file with the next 10 FTP sites, you were always kind of wired in. But that was the case of like, I downloaded Quake, but I'd already purchased Quake. The disc just hadn't shown up yet. And I'm like, well, fuck this. I'm not going to wait, And my CD-ROM drive didn't even work for audio anyway because of an IRQ conflict. So I never, at the time, I could not play Quake 1 with music because I either got like the conflict was between the sound card and the CD-ROM drive. So I could either have sound in the game or just CD audio. And it's terrible. So yeah, that was maybe the last thing that I would have like pirated in terms of just like, here's a brand new game or whatever. But over time, between kind of me getting into this line of work, obviously, and then yeah, you're right, Steam, it's the same thing that happened in music, right? I mean, it's very easy to have a gigantic collection of MP3s, but then at some point you're like, well, iTunes made it easier to just like click a button and buy this album. And then now it's like, now you don't even own it. You just go stream it from whatever subscription service or whatever. And then you get like me where it all loops back around again. And you're like, but the quality isn't good enough. What if I had FLAC? And then I started re-ripping all my CD collection into FLAC like some kind of insane person. But I don't know. Yeah, that was always the thing, is like, if you can just make something easier, like that was the whole thing. If you can compete with, the kids that have more time than money and are willing to pirate stuff, or just like acknowledge that like those kids are always going to be there and they're always going to steal no matter what, because it's just, they were never going to be your potential consumer anyway. There is still this wide audience of people that are just like, no, just let me click a button and buy it. I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to go risk downloading, viruses and all the other stuff that you just don't want to hassle with when it comes to sketchy ass software these days. Blake in Portland writes in and says, this is kind of a weird question, but like, what can you say about the hardware in Apple devices these days? And can you see Apple benefiting from their fancy high-tech chips? I don't even know if this is a gaming question per se, because Apple's just like so not interested in video games, but like there sure are a lot of games on phones, and Apex Legends came out there not that long ago and all this other stuff, but like, I don't know. It seems like
the question there seems to be more around like the M1 chips, and can anything come from it a little bit.
Yeah,
I think probably to me that CPU really hasn't mattered as much, unless you're playing like Civilization or Paradox or it's any number of those games that really
some of the
need
stuff
those
I've
cycles.
Seen, yeah, some of the stuff I've seen around the 4090 reviews are people saying like, actually some of these games, because of the power of this GPU, you end up being CPU bottlenecked.
Yeah, and it's just going to be the types of games that are there. I don't think it necessarily matters kind of Apple within their hardware stuff. As you said, they seem to either flounder or not respect. They just don't seem to understand gaming. I think they look at it as their normal way, which is, hey, we can come and be disruptive and own this space. And they don't really go about it the right way.
No, and I don't necessarily see their chips making their way into non-Apple devices either. Like that's kind of the thing I've been wondering as time goes on, is like, do we end up seeing an architecture shift on consoles? Or, like, does ARM take a bigger footprint, and does ARM suddenly get into more gaming devices and all of that sort of stuff? And, do these M1 chips, do the lessons learned there with Apple stuff end up benefiting other machines down the line or something like that? Because it's felt for a while, they're like, oh, like these consoles right now, they're just PCs. They're just fancy PCs. But eventually, whether it's like price per site, whatever, however you want to break it down, like at some point ARM will probably make sense for consoles moving forward. And will that architecture shift see a huge break in backwards compatibility all over again? and will we see that gigantic messy shift, in 5 years time, 7 years time, whatever. And yeah, so that seems like maybe the next thing potentially around the bend is like, will we see some kind of architecture shift on console?
Yeah.
Nintendo was already there, for better or worse. Their system has huge vulnerabilities because of the kind of off the shelf stuff they ended up relying on, that they had to try to patch in a hardware revision after the fact. Let's see here. What do we got? Another Nintendo question from Ben in Boston. Nintendo is notoriously bad at all things internet, but Splatoon 3 seems to be heading in the right direction. Do you expect any real differences next time around? Will their next console still have friend codes, chat through a stupid phone app, and all the other limitations that the Switch does? I don't think they have any reason to change it.
Yeah, that just seems to be... They have their strengths, they have their weaknesses. Yeah. Their weaknesses don't really hurt their strengths in any way. They hurt you of them trying to act in the spheres that Sony and Microsoft do, but they don't really play in that world too much. So I'm kind of with you. Like, I just don't see too much of that, changing.
Yeah, I mean, Splatoon 3 is like selling crazy well, and it is, it's a competitive shooter. And you look at it and you go like, yeah, it'd be nice if if making friends on this platform was easier. It'd be nice if the voice chat worked a little bit more smoothly and all that other stuff, but it's certainly not preventing people from buying this game. So I don't think Nintendo is learning the lesson of like, boy, we've got to get better at this stuff. I think they've gotten better enough to probably stick it out for at least another generation without making any massive changes. I'd love to see them modernize their stuff, but also I don't come to Nintendo platforms for these features. Generally speaking, Splatoon is maybe the one exception I can think of off the top of my head where it's like, oh, here's an online game that I really want to be able to do this stuff with. When it comes to like something like Super Mario Maker, like that stuff was always very clunky. The way they shared levels, the way they built all that stuff was always just notoriously awful. And I think they could be better on that front as well. But it's just not the stuff they care about. They are making their big single player games, and it's just not the thing that they are known for, and they seem to be totally okay with that. Ryan in Illinois writes in and says, last week in the Axios gaming newsletter, they stated that Sony's Herman Hulst told Axios that the reason for the existence of The Last of Us Part 1 was the desire to have a definitive version of the game. So this is the PS5 remake of the first Last of Us game. Given that The Last of Us Remastered, which came out on PlayStation 4 originally, runs in 4K 60 frames per second with HDR on PlayStation 5 systems, and that there are no obvious gameplay or visual issues in desperate need of repair, that statement rings hollow to me. When Sony possesses the rights to notable games such as Bloodborne that have terrible performance and low resolution on every platform from base PS4 to PS5, it certainly feels like that effort is not being put to its best possible use cases. When you think of games that are deserving of actual definitive edition, what comes to mind, and how do you feel about the continued proliferation of remasters and remakes into the modern gaming era? Yeah, this one's weird, man. Like there's rumors going around that they're gonna do a PlayStation 5 remake of the first Horizon Zero Dawn game.
Yeah, it feels really soon.
Yeah, and that game came out on PS4, and they patched it in a way that makes it run a lot better on a PlayStation 5. Even though it's not a native PS5 game, it's just one of those things that you just call like, why, and this will now be the second time, because they did that remastered Last of Us and for PS4, and now they're gonna do another Last of Us for PlayStation 5. You used to look at some of the Sony projects, especially some of these early generation, like whether it was like Naughty Dog doing a remake or something like that. When it came to the Last of Us Remastered, like the reasoning used to feel like, oh, we just want to get up to speed on the hardware, and so our first project for this hardware is going to be a remake or a remaster so that we can, just very quickly, we don't have to worry about creating something from scratch. It's something we already know our way around. We just need to get up to speed on this new technology. And then from there, we can take on our first full big crazy project. And that always seemed sensible to me, but something about a re-release of The Last of Us always felt weird. The reasoning seemed to be like, oh, well, there's that Last of Us TV show coming out. Maybe they want to have something there. So I guess that's the crux of this interview, is it's Herman Holst of Sony saying like, no, we just thought we wanted to have a definitive version of the game out there, which I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind any time that they'll re-put out, you know, the games and stuff. Like, I mean, it's nothing new, right? How many times we've seen Skyrim, you know, in whatever versions that it's come out at this point. To me, it's like, if you like the games, be happy about it. You know, as long as that there's some way, hopefully the companies do the right thing and either auto upgrade you or give you a discount. And you're shaking your head and they don't and they won't. And, you know, so then why are they doing it? And it's like, well, because it's easy, low hanging fruit for them.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that ends up being the reality of it. And it's an IP that they completely own, where, you know, they bring up the rights to Bloodborne, and like, yeah, they could go remake Bloodborne and make it run really well on current consoles and PC and all that stuff. And there's definitely a crowd of people that want to do that. But then, you know, From Software has a piece of that. It's not something that immediately leads to a sequel unless they're doing that business with From Software in the background, which maybe, you know, they do own a piece of that studio now. So I think there's potential for that down the line. But this just, to me, looks like, actually, in some ways, to me, this looks like Sony likes to make its big, prestigious single-player games, and those are not service games. Those are not games that have long tails. Those are games that sell the way old games used to sell. They sell up front, and then they eventually make them part of their new subscription service, and a lot of people get access to them for, you know, the price of that subscription service. And this is them really trying to wring as much money out of each one of those projects as they possibly can.
And it also keeps them like relevant, you know, to a degree. Like a lot of the franchises, like, hey, the fact we're talking about it to a degree is you know, it's a part of it. It makes those franchises more impactful and more important to them, like, over time. So, you know, the bigger question is like, what are you doing in between those big releases, you know, of their big things, if you're not doing this? And to me, it just looks like a cheap, smart way to do it.
Yeah. Like if you had if you had like a smaller kind of pre-production team working on Last of Us 3 or something like that, then yeah, maybe you can take the rest of the studio during that ramp up period and be like, hey, why don't you guys knock out a Last of Us remaster while we are over here figuring out what's really next. And yeah, it could be something as simple as that too.
And the reality is, like, how many games, like, are, you know, that are we talking about that, like, we know that most people are not going to go to because they're older, they, you know, they're not up to snuff of what like normal stuff is. And I think that's the other thing that you just have to be cognizant of is like, dude, there's plenty of new gamers that are coming around, and they may have heard that that's a great game, and why not have it be the best version? Like, especially if it's a story-based game like that, like, the level of people, you know, rebuying to replay that story, I'm sure it's there, but I bet it's not the largest portion of that sale. I don't think it's a double dip. I think it's more like, hey, this is a really good game. It's an important franchise for us. Let's make sure that it's the best possible version because we want it to exist for a long time. And I don't, that doesn't bother me as much.
Yeah, I don't necessarily get too caught up in the like, well, if they weren't doing this, they could be doing this, because it's never that easy. There's always some IP rights or who's going to do the work. Like Naughty Dog's not going to remake Bloodborne. Like that's not their, you know, they're not going to do that. So it doesn't really feel the same sort of scenario as that. I just kind of look at it as like, you know, I think to me where that starts to fall apart is like, you know, it's still really hard to buy a PlayStation 5. And it sounds like they're ramping up inventory, you know, probably around the release of God of War. They'll probably really try to flood the channel with as many consoles as they possibly can to try to make that work. And so that's the sort of situation where it's like, yeah, like there are a lot of new players, but are those new players buying PlayStation 5s? Can they find a PlayStation 5? Like there's just a lot of supply chain, you know, like this supply issue with just getting consoles into people's hands. And so sometimes that still feels a little bit a little bit weird to me, but I don't know. Like I said, this whole business just feels really strange these days, and this to me just kind of lines up with a lot of that other stuff. It's like, what is AAA? What are the big studios doing, and why is Halo so content light and broken? And, you see rumors about like, oh, they're going to re-platform Halo Infinite on the Unreal Engine because the tech debt they've got on the engine they've been kicking around since like Reach or whatever the hell's under the hood there is just too much for them to deal with anymore. And you're like, God, that sounds like a nightmare. But if they can pull it off, it will probably set them up for years to come. Yeah, just, man, I don't know. It's also complicated. Raul writes in from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to say, what is your favorite Iguana entertainment game? You remember Iguana? They did Turok. That is probably the safe answer.
That's right.
Is to say Turok and Turok 2. And then, well, the whole franchise is them. Yeah.
When you first said that, I was like, iguana, and I was like, wait a second, are we talking about just like any type of lizard?
Yeah.
Which then got me to like Gex.
Yeah, I mean,
and
Gex
I was
is
like,
clearly the answer here. No, so Iguana, eventually they were owned by Acclaim, and they became Acclaim Studios Austin near the end there, and they made games from, let's call it 92 to about 2004. They did some pretty terrible late era NBA Jam games for the N64. Iggy's Wrecking Balls. No? They did the South Park game, the first person shooter for N64, which is better than it had any right to be. But the answer is probably some form of Turok. I was never the biggest Turok fan.
Turok was tough because of the control scheme.
Yeah.
And
you were in the exact same boat I was, where you played games on PC. So when all these console shooters started getting big, like GoldenEye and stuff like that, it was just like, yeah, these are neat, but like, I'm over here like playing real games.
Tough aiming. I don't want to shoot with Y, like, whatever. I just remember Turok having like an especially egregious like control scheme on it that was just very off the norm. But yeah, those were still good games. It's no Trespasser.
No, but what are you gonna do? Turok, at least when they got into their multiplayer side of stuff, I mean, obviously it was split screen, but like they started having inventive weapons like the cerebral bore and weird shit like that was sort of fun. So I don't know. I'd probably say Turok 2 is probably the height of the series, I guess, unless you're into the multiplayer stuff. They did a multiplayer focused game called Rage Wars that was, I don't know, again, like I was playing games on PC and could barely care about any of that N64 stuff by that point. They did Vex, like one of the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. It was like one of those action platformers that was just like on the cusp of like when they finally stopped making action platformers. They made a lot of really sketchy stuff, but I feel like that's Acclaim. Acclaim made a lot of really really sketchy stuff over the years for sure. Let's see here. Maybe you can take one more here before we call it. I'm trying to. Okay. Yeah. Daddywarbugs from the Discord says, I just want to play the Modern Warfare 2019 campaign, man. I enjoyed the beta of Modern Warfare 2 enough to maybe buy it, and I'd be more than willing to pay like $20 to play the campaign for Modern Warfare 2019, but I ain't paying 60 fucking bucks, man. What a load of shit. Black Ops 2 is 10 years old and it is still $60 on Steam. What the fuck is wrong with Activision? Dude, if you could go buy the old Call of Duty games for less money, who would buy the new ones? If you're a casual Call of Duty player who doesn't need to buy it every year because you don't care about it that much, you would buy the cheap one. And so Activision, like Nintendo, just says like, oh, we're going to charge full price for these games forever because we always want to funnel people into the newest one. We don't ever want them to say, oh, I'm going to buy this older one for less money. They always want to, especially now that they have battle passes and Call of Duty points as a currency and all of this other stuff. They do not want you to go play some old Call of Duty game when they could get you into the funnel for the newest one, where all the maps are free now because they hope that you will buy the Snoop Dogg skin. As someone who bought the Snoop Dogg skin, I will say, Snoop Dogg in a World War II shooter.
Worth it.
That game was bad, but yeah, I think that's the situation there. Nintendo barely ever lowers the price on its games because they know that you're probably, there are a lot of people buying a Switch for the first time, and they're like, oh, cool, man, there's a Mario game. Like, that Mario game is still valid. It doesn't need to be $20. People will buy it at $60. So the answer is, what the fuck is wrong with Activision? What the fuck is wrong with consumers? Because consumers are the ones who will look at that and go, yeah, no, I'll pay that price. Or what the fuck is wrong with Nintendo? Nothing, because they know that you will still pay full price for Breath of the Wild, because what's replaced it? And even when the new Zelda comes out, there'll be a new spur of interest and people going like, oh, I should go see what Breath of the Wild was all about. And so they're like, yeah, we know you'll pay it, so we'll charge it. That's all. It's easy stuff. Is it fun and pro-consumer and all this stuff? No, maybe not. But no one has ever accused Activision of being pro-consumer. Anyway, be sure to input your phone number into their client so that you can play their games going forward and have a good time with that. And that's going to do it for the show. Again, podcast@guard.bike is the email address to send in your emails. If you want to get access to the Discord, get an ad-free version of the show, you can go to patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. We got some bonus shows there. The new episode of Game Boys to Men was recorded yesterday, so I need to find some time to edit that together and hopefully have that for you this week. Of course, the next episode of the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame is also a little bit overdue now that I think hopefully my son had a fever all last night, but woke up this morning without one, and so hopefully we are finally on the other side of being sick and I can get this fucking thing back on track, man. Get you some videos about video games, goddammit. Dave, thanks so much for coming through. It's been great to catch up and talk games with you.
Thanks for having me. I'm here for all your Linux gaming needs.
This is it. Because now I have Linux gaming needs too. Yeah. That's the crazy thing, is like they sold 1 million of those things and suddenly there are 1 million more people who suddenly care about Linux. Like, the last thing I want to do with a Steam Deck is install Windows on it. And some people are doing that to get around the anti-cheat stuff, especially. But like, I just look at that as like, that's admitting failure.
If you're worried about putting some random string into a terminal, just ask me.
Yeah, no, yes, I will. Because I'm also really good. It's usually only with the like installing Ubuntu on Windows. Like, I'm really good at breaking that install over and over again, but it's really easy to just wipe it and just be like, oh, I thought I was installing Python, but boy, none of this is working the way this YouTube video said it would. Damn it. But with that, I end up blowing it away and reinstalling from scratch and then breaking it all over again. The Steam Deck I have yet to break in a major way. I installed something that made it crash over and over again, but I found my way around enough to uninstall it, and so that felt like a small victory. But yeah, I don't know. I got SSH and SFTP working on it, so it's easy to transfer files to it and all the other stuff, and that's been nice. Yeah, I don't know, man. Linux on the desktop, I guess it's a thing now.
Brand new world.
Yeah, Gabe Newell brought it to you. He talked shit about Windows for a long time. And you were like, I don't see where this is going, Gabe. You sell a lot of games on Windows, but I get it. You don't like Microsoft. And now here he is. Mr. Linux. Him and Linus. That's it. Yeah. All right. Well, Dave, we'll see you around. We'll have to have you come back at some point and we can talk more Linux games.
Yep.
And I mean, I want to talk more about some of your sim proclivities.
Oh yeah,
down the line here.
I'll put a screenshot or a picture of it. It's ridiculous. It's properly ridiculous.
Yeah. And you can find that Dave's on Twitter at Enemy Kite, and you can go follow him there and employ him to do something.
No doubt.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thanks, and have a good rest of your week. Be back tomorrow to stream some stuff. Probably no Friday stream because I'm going to the dentist. Very exciting. We'll see you then. Bye.
See you, duders.